Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Dieguez.
Here.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Present.
Councilmember Collazo is here. Councilmember Ruano
Present.
is here. Councilmember Alvarez notified me that he will be joining the meeting a little bit late. He's still in another work meeting. Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
Here.
Mayor Sid.
Present.
Mayor, you have the quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And yes, I know you had told me before that Councilman Alvarez will be here shortly, so I know he's in another meeting. Let's all rise for the prayer led by Pastor Juan Barek, who's here.
Okay, thank you. Good evening again. I'm Pastor Juan Barek. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for inviting me and members of the council. Let's pray. Father, we love you. We thank you for your guidance, for your kindness. We pray for this meeting. We pray for the mayor. We pray for every council member. Please bless them. Also help them to make the right decision for this town. We pray in your name. Amen.
Let's remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Vice Mayor Nelson Rodriguez.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Order of business, deferrals, additions, deletions.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilman Dieguez.
I just wanted to make a motion that as to item 11B, that we waive the council rules and procedures in order for me to make a series of motions to get that in a better posture that accurately reflects what I intended.
We could do it there, or we could do it, whichever way, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
Hey, there's a
I just
motion.
figured I'd do it now.
Okay, there's a motion to waive the council requirement on the limited discussion on item 11A, no, 11B.
B.
11B.
We'll second it.
There's a second by the Vice Mayor. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. We've officially waived that time limitation for item 11B. Any other deferrals, additions, and deletions, councils? Deferrals, additions, or deletions? Going once, going twice. Sold. We're moving on to public comments. Madam Clerk, if you want to remind the public of the new clock that's up there and the time
And I'm also going to read the section regarding public comments. All comments or questions from the attending public to the council shall be directed to the mayor in a courteous tone. No person other than the council and the person recognized by the mayor as having the floor shall be permitted to enter into discussion without the permission of the mayor. To ensure the orderly conduct and efficiency of the meeting, public comments shall be limited to 3 minutes, maximum per person. However, the mayor may authorize the extension of the time. No clapping, no applauding, heckling, verbal outburst in support of or in opposition to a speaker or her remarks shall be permitted. Should a member of the audience become unruly or behave in a manner that disrupts the orderly and efficient conduct of the meeting, the mayor is given the right and the authority to require such person to leave the council chambers. As a courtesy to others, please, electronic devices must be set to silent mode to avoid disruption of the proceedings. So 3 minutes, and let's have a good meeting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Public comments, you have 3 minutes. When the bell sounds, your 3 minutes are up, and you can also speak on when the ordinances come up and the resolutions and new business and all that. So anyone from the public wishing to speak, as public comments is officially open.
Esperanza Reynolds, 8465 Menzies Terrace.
County Commissioners and Town of Miami Lakes agenda rules read, comments from the public shall be directed in a courteous tone. No heckling, verbal outbursts in support of or in opposition to a speaker or his/her remarks shall be permitted. Should a member of the audience become unruly or behave in any manner that disrupts the orderly and efficient conduct of the meeting, the right and the authority to require such person to leave the council chambers shall be exercised. Do you have any rules of behavior for elected officials? Most county agenda rules say any person making impertinent or slanderous remarks or who becomes boisterous while addressing the commission shall be barred from further audience before the commission by the presiding officer. Why were 2 commissioners, a county attorney, Hialeah officials, mayor, police, and firefighters, 1 council member from Town of Miami Lakes, and a representative from Tallahassee present, and yet no rules were imposed on Hialeah Mayor Carlos Hernandez? During our last special call meeting, Councilwoman Ruano requested an apology on behalf of the residents of our lovely town. Was there a formal letter sent to Hialeah's municipal government? Did we file an ethics complaint on behalf of the governed? A few residents stood and spoke on our behalf during the Hialeah meeting on the bridges. Where is the consolidated support by all state of Florida officials? As for special taxing district assessments, we object to creating reserves and request that all budgets be revised to lower the assessments promised by our mayor for each Gargate special taxing district. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Esperanza.
Alex Ariano, 8465 Mentieth Terrace. We congratulate Loch Lomond Security Guard property owners for being great stewards of public trust, reducing their assessment by $190. We request that all special taxing district reserves be decreased to no more than 5% approved by Loch Lomond, and that reserves in excess of 5% be eliminated and the assessments lowered. In order to lower the surplus, $49,000 were transferred to a budget item, still leaving a surplus on our books. This is section 1. We want a reduction of at least $50 in this year's budget. Royal Oak Section 1 security guards with a surplus of close to $130,000. Please return the funds to property owners, decreasing the assessment by $218 or paying $582 instead of the proposed $800.14. Royal Oaks East with a surplus of close to $169,000. Return the funds to property owners, decreasing the assessment by $316 or paying $662 instead of the proposed $978. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Anyone else from the public wishing to speak?
Mr. Mayor, tonight I'm going to speak on behalf of the Hialeah Miami Lakes Republican Club. I am the president. Also, Mr. George Morphy is here with me, Director of Public Relations. And this, I want to make a public statement about Mrs. Cindy Polo, District 103. Last week, I think, and I want to make this a public statement, she was very disrespectful to the town. I think that her statement was an insult to all of us. And so I just want to play real quick the tape.
Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, as somebody who bleeds Hialeah, bleeds it, I know what it's like to go to HML and not have the folks from Miami Lakes maybe want to send their kids there. So I know it and I lived it. And those folks didn't vote for me.
So she is representing us, and she should be ashamed of herself. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Going once, going twice? Yes. Yeah, you can also speak before an item comes up by just walking up while the item comes up. So Thank you. Going once, going twice. Public comments is closed. You can also speak whenever you have an item of interest. Just walk on up. Madam Clerk, are there any live remote public comments?
No.
I don't see any appointments also, no committee reports, and there's no consent calendar here. We're on to item 11A, ordinances and first reading. Mr. Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. An ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Miami Lakes, Florida, approving, adopting a non-ad valorem assessment role for special taxing districts, approving, adapting, and ratifying special assessment districts rates for special taxing districts, including but not limited to security guard and multipurpose maintenance, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. This is an ordinance first reading unless it's waived by the rules. There's no discussion on the ordinances on first reading. Mr. Manager.
Yeah, the item is self-explanatory. It is the first reading of the ordinance to set the rates for next fiscal year. Danny Angel, our Parks Director, who has taken over temporary control of managing the special taxing districts, and Jimena Suarez before him. They did an admirable job trying to get the special taxing district committees to meet. Some of them were very active, very responsive. They met frequently. Some of them, they still have not been able to attain quorum. So these are the recommended budgets and the recommended assessments for next fiscal year.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Are there any motions on the table regarding item 11A, ordinances and an ordinance in first reading?
A motion.
There's a motion on the floor.
Second.
There's a second. Madam Clerk, there's no discussion unless waived by the council. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Motion to approve item 11A, motion, ordinance in first reading. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Collazo.
No.
Councilmember Councilmember Ruano.
No.
Councilmember Dieguez.
No.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
No.
I'm sorry, no? No. Okay. Mayor Sid.
No.
Okay. The motion does not pass.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're on to item 11B, another ordinance in first reading. Mr. Attorney.
An ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Miami Lakes, Florida, creating regulations for the use of a portion of FP&L franchise fee revenues, providing for the creation of a budget line item, providing for repeal of laws in conflict, providing for severability, providing for inclusion into the code, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. Mr. Town Manager.
This is the ordinance in first reading that Councilmember Dieguez brought up and asked us to draft on his behalf, and it's before you. What it does, it has an exhibit with a formula that all franchise fee revenues in excess of what we have historically been using for our general fund and general operations would be used specifically for infrastructure issues, for street repair, sidewalks, etc., and that is what is before you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, just to be clear, this would have an effective date of October 1st, 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Are there any motions on the table before we head into discussion?
Mr. Mayor, well, yeah, it would have an effective date as far as, well, the effective date is immediate upon adoption, but it would have a sort of delayed implementation.
Councilman Dieguez, just for clarification, your original motion and additions, deferrals, and deletions was referencing to the limitation of the council discussion, or
Correct.
you wanted to waive the rule to discuss this item in first reading?
To discuss this item on first reading, but if I'm not mistaken, it's part of our council rules and procedures too, no?
Yeah, both. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I was waiving both the time limits and
Okay.
the...
No, perfect. Just wanted to clarify. Okay. Well, before we get into discussion, there has to be an intent to discuss it, so there has to be a motion, one way or the other, then we can discuss it.
Correct. I'll go ahead and I'll move the item for discussion's sake.
I'll second.
I'll second.
Councilman Diegues.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I don't know what happened. I guess there was some disconnect between myself and legal. Unfortunately, the item doesn't fully reflect everything that I had sent in my emailed comments. So I'm going to run through the motions here that I've prepared. There are about 7 in total, and I've broken them up on purpose just to make it easier for Gina to digest, as well as for my colleagues in the council. So with that, my first motion to amend the item is with respect to the whereas clauses. And I'll repeat it for the council. I gave an advance copy to Gina earlier so that she can follow along easier. But the first change on the first whereas clause, pardon me, actually that was incorrect. On the, this is the first reading, sorry. So in the first whereas clause, it says, council passed on an ordinance the second reading. Okay, no, I apologize. That was my mistake. I thought it was referring to this item. Skip over to the second whereas clause where it says during the sunshine meetings. I'd like it to reflect that during the 2019 budget sunshine meetings, just sort of cleaning the language up there a little bit. Then on the third whereas clause, deleting where it says a suggestion was to ensure, and instead insert as a means of ensuring. So again, to delete in the third whereas clause, a suggestion was to ensure, so that it reads instead, whereas a means of ensuring. Then after it says, on the same whereas clause, after it says of collected, to put monthly franchise fee. Then in the fourth whereas clause, and this will be the last one for this one, changing it so that it reads, the town council desires to codify restrictions on, that's my additional language, restrictions on the use of excess franchise fee dollars and provide a mechanism for its accounting and calculation. That's the additional language there. So that is the first motion. Again, just cleaning up some of the whereas language.
Can you repeat it again, please?
Madam Clerk, would you like to repeat that?
Yes. Okay, the first motion is to add in the second whereas during the 2019 budget sunshine meetings, and I'm going to read it as Councilman Diegues would like it to read. Maybe that's
One
easier.
second, Madam Clerk, is that the first change?
Yes, on the
Okay,
first page
perfect,
of the
thank you.
ordinance, the second whereas clause should state, during the 2019 budget sunshine meetings, the town council discussed concerns regarding specific uses of FPL franchise fee dollars. And whereas as a means of ensuring that monies in excess of 3% of collected monthly franchise fee dollars would be used specifically for town infrastructure projects. And whereas the town council desires to codify restrictions on the use of excess franchise fee dollars and provide a mechanism for its accounting and calculation. That's all the additions that Councilman Diegues just put into the record on the first page.
And that is the motion.
Are there any seconds to his motion?
Just one question.
Wait, no.
I'll second. I'll second for discussion.
There's a second for discussion. Yep. Vice Mayor, questions on the amendment?
No, I was just curious if it's not redundant because it already says August 2019 above. To add 2019 again, it doesn't make a difference?
It's that particular line is more, I guess semantics. It's not necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily say it's redundant. It kind of identifies which sunshine meetings. I get that it has.
No,
the
not
year.
the board budget. The year again.
Yeah. No, I mean.
It's not a big deal.
Not a big deal. Yeah.
I'm okay with the changes. Just wanted to make sure it's all right. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll be happy. Yeah. Let's just leave it as is.
It's not to nitpick. I just want to make sure that we're okay with that.
Any further discussion on the amendment to the main motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. We're back on to the main motion as amended. Any further discussion on the main motion?
For my second amendment, and we're getting more into the substance here. Everybody will turn to Exhibit A, if you haven't already, which has a lot of the meat and potato stuff here. My motion is to change the line that says in the second line there, collected monthly FPL franchise fee or $125,000. That's what it currently reads. I'd like to change that to $106,250, which is basically representing a total amount of $1.275 million every year, and that would be the monthly payment. Currently at $125,000, that calculates that $1.5 million is what the town will generate in franchise fee revenue that could be used for general fund purposes. And I think it's better just to keep it at the level that we got last year and that we are anticipating for this coming year.
Thank you, Councilman Dieguez. Are there any seconds on his motion?
I'll second.
Madam Clerk, you got the motion down. Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion to amend the main motion as originally amended? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. We're back on to the main motion as amended twice. Councilman Dieguez.
Third motion out of seven.
You're capped at 3 amendments. No more.
Well, I'll move quickly as best as possible. But for the third, is it really the rules? Oh, that's right. We waived it anyway. So for the third motion, amending the item, we had discussed at the Sunshine meeting, and I think there was an appetite for deleting number 5, the stormwater system maintenance, because it already has a separate funding source. So that was a bit redundant. So my motion is to strike number 5, and then for number 4, to add planting, so that it reads tree trimming, removal, replacement, or planting. That is the motion.
Second.
Madam Clerk, can you repeat the motion?
Yes. The motion is to strike number 5 on Exhibit A and to add in number 4 for it to read the following way. Tree trimming, comma, removal, comma, replacement or planting. So adding the word or planting in number 4 and eliminating number 5. That would be the motion.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. There's a second on that. Any discussion? Yes, Councilman Rodriguez.
This is with respect to item number 5, the removal of the stormwater system. And I know I mentioned this during our meeting. I think it's probably a better idea to leave the flexibility in there. At one of the meetings we've had recently, we had an emergency with a resident whose house was basically underwater whenever it rained. And although we have stormwater funds that are set forth for these items, a lot of those projects are already in the pipeline, and you would have to move things out of order or maybe stop or reprioritize a project. Whereas if you have the flexibility to do it, you can attack an emergency using these funds as opposed to having to reorganize yourself and your whole stormwater plan. So I think I understand the intent that there's already some funds for that. Maybe if you want to put emergency stormwater system maintenance, something that, I want to give us the most flexibility for those types of issues.
I guess my reticence to, well, Mr. Mayor, may I respond?
Absolutely, the floor is yours.
So I went through back and forth on what you had said at the meeting, and the more I thought about it, the reason why I was fine with deleting it is because we do have an unassigned balance that we can use and pull from for those emergencies. The other aspect was that, again, it kind of has its own source. These other things don't necessarily really have their own dedicated source. That was my thinking behind it. I think I'm going to leave it as is like that, because also I'm anticipating that we're going to be seeing additional revenues once we start accounting for all the development here, Satori, any natural increases in our millage or revenues. So I just feel that would be enough. Also, after speaking with the manager earlier today, it appears as if the unassigned balance might even grow a little bit. So that's why I felt comfortable that for emergencies we would be covered.
Understood.
And then there's the issue of how do you define an emergency, as you know.
Councilman Collazo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and
And I apologize, Councilman Collazo. I needed to recognize that Councilman Alvarez is here. He walked in a couple minutes ago. Back to Councilman Collazo. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Rodriguez, thank you for paying attention. And I know that this issue is probably on our hot button list, and I know it's something that we're going to address in Tallahassee. And I think it's germane to the discussion what I want to ask and direct to the manager, because you bring up a good point. We just passed a stormwater plan that may not necessarily have the things that are most urgent to us to address. So I wanted to hear from the manager and from the staff, how can we reprioritize or how can we accelerate certain things? Because here's what I hate. We have residents that have their homes flooding, and maybe that area is not slated until 5 years from now. What's the flexibility that we do have within that current silo of money or within that stormwater fund to move around to make sure that those issues are addressed if we do not get the funding in Tallahassee?
Well, obviously, you have full reign over what priorities are. The priorities that were established in the stormwater, in the latest update to the stormwater master plan, were based on need. So they did take into account which are the areas that are flooding the worst, that have been flooding for the longest time, that have the most damage. They took all that into account. So, I mean, it's all, everything is flexible in there. The decisions are all ours. No outside entity is mandating that we do A, B, or C in that order. We can do D, C, B, or A.
So to ameliorate your concern, Councilman Rodriguez, the issue of funding is in our hands. So if we want to prioritize and make that important, make sure that those residents' homes are secure, then I think that has to come from us. And I think if we were to move in that direction, unfortunately, it's not an item on the agenda, or else I think we'd all be in support of that. And maybe that's something that we can tackle in September's meeting. But I think we're all in agreement how we can address that.
Councilman, I just want to, if I can clarify something, because I want to be clear. If we do a different project than what was slated by the Stormwater Master Plan, we can do that. And we've now addressed a project that's not in next up. But then the project that's next up is not getting done. So there's always, there's a zero-sum game. So whatever we do, that means something else is not getting done. So.
Mayor?
Yeah, I was going to rebut, but.
I know Councilman Collazo had the floor, so
No, go ahead.
I'll let him finish his thoughts, and then we'll go to.
And I think you're right. You know, it's always a zero-sum game. And I think the position that we're in is when we see that residents' homes are being affected, I think that's something that we need to prioritize. And I understand it may delay other projects, but I think, you know, using our better judgment, so to speak, there may be other things that maybe can hold off, right? And I don't know what those things are. I know that you're advocating for, and you will always advocate for, to get more resources, because that way we can deliver more services. But what I'm saying is, and this was to ameliorate Councilman Rodriguez's point, was that there is a mechanism, if things come up, that we can reprioritize and that we can put that funding priority in front of whatever else is next. And that's on us, right? So I understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, there is flexibility. Just because we passed the plan last month doesn't mean that we have to stick to that plan 100%. And if we needed to shift and reprioritize because we saw a situation that maybe we didn't account for maybe a year ago, or maybe some situations gotten a lot worse in a lot shorter amount of time, that we can prioritize funds and address that issue. That's...
Yeah, I mean, obviously, these are, the update to the plan, we didn't do it internally. We didn't just say, hey, who's complaining the most or anything of that. We have professional engineers that went out and assessed it and gave us what should be, provided us a 10-year plan for the next 10 years until the next update. So, sometimes the loudest voice isn't exactly what's the most dire need. So, and that's what we try and do by giving it to an outside engineering firm who could assess that and kind of do it free of those pressures. So, But obviously, we could always, and we are going to go through a study now to look at not necessarily the plant, but the rate. It's a rate study that we're going to do here now soon, and we can come back to you with recommendations on whether that rate for the stormwater repairs needs to be modified.
Councilman Rodriguez and Councilman Alvarez.
Yes, Councilman Gonzalez, the point of my comment was simply to allow us the flexibility and give us more options in the event that we are faced with something like this. We, at the end of the day, you're right, we do control the funds and we can assign them as we wish. But if we remove this item, then this is something that we cannot address with these infrastructure funds. So my only comment was, let's just not limit ourselves to the flexibility that we have for these types of projects. I agree with you, most of the stormwater projects are going to get done through the stormwater fund. But if we have the chance to use these funds for infrastructure projects, and we are aware of something that is of a priority or a need immediately, then we can actually use it. So I wanted to give ourselves a little bit more flexibility than removing it. Options. There you go.
Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez. Councilman Alvarez. And the Vice Mayor. I apologize.
Mr. Manager, in the case of an emergency, and going with what Councilmember Rodriguez brought up, even though we have the flexibility to prioritize the funding from the stormwater funds, in the case of an emergency, keeping number 5 in Exhibit A, does that give the town the flexibility to address if there are multiple issues in the state, or in the case of an emergency, a hurricane? Does it give you more flexibility of having an additional fund in case of an emergency to address an issue with drainage?
Oh, yeah. Having it in here allows us to consider drainage issues with this funding source. If it's not in here, then the only source that we have available would be the stormwater fee.
Like, and the way that the way I'm interpreting the conversation is safety first, right, for our residents. And one thing that we can't predict, we just have to monitor, is emergencies. So I think in the best interest of the safety of our residents, if we do have an emergency, that we have an additional fund for an infrastructure project like this, because we can't control, and we're monitoring the hurricane now. You can't control a natural disaster. The appropriation funds that we needed for a drainage project, we didn't receive. So I think what Councilmember Rodriguez is saying is just to give ourselves the flexibility in the case of an emergency. Now, how that would be worded to make everyone feel more comfortable, that is up for discussion. But I honestly feel that gives us an alternative option to the stormwater funds.
Mr. Mayor, just,
Thank you.
May I close?
Just in response, I know he asked you a direct question, so Councilman Dieguez.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify as well what I was trying to say was that I think we already have sufficient options. If we need more money to fund water infrastructure, we raise the fee. That applies to that. These other areas, they don't have a dedicated fee, so there's less flexibility, if you will, for those areas. And when we're talking about an emergency, such as the residents that were there on, I believe it's 138th, if I'm not mistaken, we're already using and moving things around to accommodate them from existing sources, perhaps even including the unassigned balance. I think we have to remind ourselves that above the 15% that we are required by ordinance to put aside, we do have an unassigned balance. We're going to be asked to dip into that as part of our budget to equalize the books. Again, I don't encourage that we dip into those funds frequently, but for what we're talking about emergencies, we're going to have another source already. So that was what I was trying to say, is that we kind of already have at least two avenues, from the unassigned balance as well as from the stormwater funds to go ahead and address emergencies. Yes, that may require rejiggering. Maybe it will require a temporary increase in the fee 1 year to get the pace of those projects back on track. But I'm just saying we have it. But look, I don't want this to hold up things. Ultimately, the way I look at it is, even if the money is there, we will still be able to allocate accordingly. I would still always push for it to come out of the proper source, which I view as the stormwater fund and the unassigned balance. But again, I don't want to hold up this motion and create any further issues. So I will go ahead and I'll amend to keep number 5, and then keep the proposed changes that I had indicated earlier for number 4, which is tree trimming, removal, replacement, or planting.
So Councilman Diegues withdrew his motion. He has another motion on the table that Madam Clerk's going to repeat, and then somebody needs to second it so we can go to the Vice Mayor for discussion. Madam Clerk?
So Councilmember withdrew his motion, and his new motion is to keep number 5 in the Exhibit A, but to also keep what he amended previously, which reads in number 4, tree trimming, comma, removal, comma, replacement or planting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Vice Mayor?
All right, so thank you, Councilman Diegues, for changing the amendment. I think that I don't want to push back any of the water problems, especially now with the climate change and all the things that we're talking about in reference to saltwater intrusion. And although the canals are not ours, but there is a lot of issues with flooding that we need to address, and we may need to address some that aren't in our work plan, in our strategic plan. So, but my question is, why? And I know you explained it, but I don't think I understood it properly. Why from 125 to 106? It's a difference of $18,000. The 125,000.
You got to multiply it by 12. That's the monthly. That's the base monthly that they're asking to utilize for general fund operations, which is, when you add it up over the entire year, is actually a $300,000 increase, and I was not okay with that. I mean, I think we can live within a 1.2 framework, which is what we're currently working with, and we can. You're correct, 1.275, if there's any additional need to grow, shall we say, like add a position to the town or whatever, we're going to be the principal payment on town hall is going to go down $200,000 next year. We're going to be able to reasonably expect additional revenue from the new apartments that are going up around here from the Lennar project.
I didn't.
Okay, yeah, just to explain.
Yeah, I just wanted to explain, but that's fine.
But that was why.
Okay,
I'd rather just kind of tighten things a little bit.
I must have missed it, and I apologize. Perfect, thank you.
No worries.
Back onto the amendment to the main motion. Any further discussion on this one? Madam Clerk, I don't know if there's 100% agreement on it. Just please call the roll.
Okay, in the motion restated by Councilmember Diegues, seconded by Vice Mayor Rodriguez. Councilmember Diegues.
Yes.
Councilmember Alvarez.
Yes.
Councilmember Collazo.
Yes.
Councilmember Ruano.
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mayor Sid.
Yes.
The amendment to the motion passes.
Thanks, guys. It could have been an easy voice vote. So I wasn't sure.
You never know.
No,
Sometimes.
I wasn't sure, so that's why. So we're back onto the main motion as amended 3 times. Councilman Diegues.
Now here comes number 4, and
Now we're on to the 4th.
yes,
Okay.
we're now at number 4 out of 7. So just 2.
So we're back onto. Can you bunch those in together? Or?
I just wanted to. I thought this was the easiest way to digest it for the council. Some of them may be acceptable to some of my colleagues, others not.
We're back onto the main motion.
Would
as
it be
amended.
easier for you to just give us a copy of that so that we can just follow along?
Well, if
No,
Gina,
I like the
No, I
mystery.
prefer not to do that because then
Gotcha.
you
Fair
gotta get
enough.
to the part. So just go.
Fair enough. So number 4, just basically, this has to. I'll explain what it is. Basically, this is to direct the town attorney to insert language restricting the use of the excess franchise fee money to only those bonds, matching grants, or other debt instruments that will mature or require a match within 5 years and that are solely for the purposes outlined in Exhibit A. So in other words, one of my concerns was that the money gets obligated for projects that are outside of a 5-year window, and, in terms of a matching grant, or that are going to, be tied up for years on end, and then we're back trying to scramble to find more money. So as a kind of way of locking things down, I wanted to insert that restrictive language, and also ensure that any bonds or matching grants that utilize the franchise fee money, the excess franchise fee money as we're calling it, only be for those 5 purposes outlined above. That is the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. We're back onto the main motion as amended for the 4th time. Councilman Dieguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amendment number 5 that I'm proposing is to direct the town attorney to insert language that would maintain funding levels from fiscal year 18-19 for the sorts of projects listed above, 1 through 5, that they be maintained from sources other than the excess franchise fee money. And I know that's not the clearest way of putting it, but just by way of explanation, one of my concerns was that, let's say we do have excess franchise fee money moving around. I'm worried that the current sources that are utilized to fund projects currently, they'll be moved around to something else, and I'd rather just use the excess fee money as a supplement to what is currently there, rather than kind of replacing the current fund. So that is the motion.
Is there a second? There's a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. We're back on to the main motion as amended 5 times. So you're on to the 6th amendment now. Okay.
We're almost done. Amendment number 6, Mr. Mayor, my motion will be to direct the town attorney to insert language stating that there will be no excess franchise fee money, or rather no franchise fee money shall be pledged toward any debt instrument or matching grant prior to October 1st, 2021. So in other words, basically that any money that is derived from the franchise fee be used to sort of help us with our current budget gap, but that it not be pledged to any long-term debt or matching grant.
Is there any seconds?
I'll second.
There's a second. Any, Madam Clerk, please repeat the 6th amendment.
The 6th amendment reads,
Which, by the way, Gina, so you know, it's mislabeled as number 7 there.
so the number 6 amendment would read, no franchise fee money shall be pledged toward any debt instrument or matching grant prior to October 1st, 2021.
Any further discussion, council?
Mayor, I've got a clarification. I just
Mr.
want to be
Manager.
clear on what the direction is. For instance, the only one that I think that this could be possible would be with the street lighting. Street lighting, we had a report from several years ago that not only to add lights and repair the lights, but to really handle the complete updating of the infrastructure, the underneath, it could be millions and millions of dollars. If this council elected to secure debt to be able to accelerate that replacement of the infrastructure for our lighting system, this amendment, do you believe, then restricts us from being able to retire that debt with this money?
My whole thinking with this is that, we've been hearing how it's going to be a tight budget year. Any such project such as that, while I understand that we might want to accelerate it, I think we can defer it for a year. And that's all this is really asking to do.
Any further discussion, council, on the 6th amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. We're back onto the main motion as amended 6 times. Councilman Dieguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And for my seventh and final motion and amendment of the evening, before we get to vote on the package, it is simply to require that the council vote on the franchise fee rate every year.
I'll
And to
second.
I'll
direct the
second.
town attorney to insert that language.
Is there any discussion, council? Vice Mayor?
Yes, so far, I agree with all of these points. I think that I have a suggestion in reference to, this is going to be a discussion that we're going to talk about afterwards. And I don't know if this is the right time to vote on this item or wait until we vote on the franchise fee. And my purpose for that is because I have a suggestion on the franchise fee. And it's a scale of a 3-year deal. And so voting on it would eliminate that motion that I was going to introduce into that. And so my suggestion is going to be 654 and for 3 years. The first year to make up the difference, the second year to recover everything we have, and the 4 is optional to 3 if we have to go to 3 to what we're paying now. It's something up for discussion, but at least it gives us, not to vote on it every year, and it gives us a stability of continence so that when they prepare their budget, at least for the next 3 years, and if you'd like to change or amend it to a 3-year vote every 3 years, that's something to think about. But at least for the first 3 years, I think it gives the budget department a stable look at using the franchise fee for what we discussed in all the meetings that we had. So that's just my suggestion.
I'll be willing to consider that. This is first reading, and we're just kind of going about it a little bit differently than we normally do. Out of respect for my colleague, I'll go ahead and I'll withdraw this amendment to think about your proposal and what you've also suggested just now. And if anything, if I decide that I still think this is the better way to go about it, then I'll bring it back at second reading. But I'll remove the item for now, and so we'll keep the amendments at 6.
Thank you, Councilman Dieguez. We are back onto the main motion as amended 6th time. Any further discussion, council? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Dieguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Ruano.
Yes.
Councilmember Alvarez.
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Collazo.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mayor Sid.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We are on to...
I just wanted to state, motion passes, ordinance, and first reading.
Yes, it will be coming back.
Mayor, can I make a point of order?
Yes.
The ordinance in first reading that was defeated a moment before this item. If we do not pass an ordinance setting those rates by September and communicate it to the county by September 15th, the special taxing districts will revert back to the county. The reason that the ordinance came before you today in first reading was so we can read it or consider it in second reading at our regular meeting September 10th, at the regular council meeting. So what I would recommend and throw out there as a suggestion is that you pass it as is in first reading, and if any council member has a concern and would like modifications, I welcome the opportunity. I wish we would have had it before today, but I welcome the opportunity to sit down with each and every one of you that have a concern, and we can go over each of the special taxing districts, and we can make the changes for second reading. But if we don't pass it today on first reading, we're not going to be able to get first and second reading in before September 15th.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. We're back to ordinances. Well, there's no motions to reconsider it.
Motion to reconsider.
Item 11A.
11A.
There's a motion on the table.
I'll second.
We're back to that. Any discussion, council? So we're back. Councilman Collazo is absolutely right. It's an ordinance for first reading. There's no discussion. We're reconsidering it. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Item 11A. Councilmember Alvarez.
Yes.
11A, motion to reconsider the item to pass the ordinance in first reading.
He wasn't
Yes.
here. No, I know.
He's here now.
Yeah, but I
He
don't
can
know if
vote.
he understood it failed.
Wait a second, let's finish, the motion to reconsider doesn't need a roll call. Just to reconsider, then we'll come back to this. All those in favor of reconsidering?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. We're back on to ordinances in first reading. Is there-
Item 11A.
Item 11A, are there any motions on the table?
Move to waive the rules.
So we're gonna, there's a motion to waive the rules to
I'll
discuss
second.
this item in first reading. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. We're back on to item 11A, ordinance of first reading. Are there any motions on the table, council? Before we go into discussion, there needs to be an attendance.
Motion.
There's a motion. There's no second, so the item,
Second.
there's a motion and a second. Discussion, Councilman Collazo, then the Vice Mayor.
What you're looking for is why we voted no, so you can reconsider, right? Or make these changes to the ordinance, so then we can put it in a posture to be voted on, right? I was at most of these meetings. Danny, I was there with you. Alyssa, we were there together. There was things that I made very clear at those meetings that I felt were unjust, and they're not reflected necessarily in this product. So I felt compelled to vote no. Now, I don't mind revisiting those things from the dais, and some of those things have to do with the fee that we're charging or burdening our residents with. I don't think that they should be tied to the level of service. I think it should be a flat rate. It should be a cost. It shouldn't be necessarily a profit center or something that we adjust if they get a higher level of service. That was issue number one. Number two was a promise that was made here last year. Where are the cost savings that are going back to the residents? A lot of these homeowners associations that have asked to participate may have not gotten clear direction from us, and that's not on you, that's not on you, that's not on anybody, that's on us, because we haven't gone to them to tell us, this is what my expectation is of the work that you come here, and that became very evident to me in a couple meetings that we were at. When this type of product is what comes back, I'm going to vote my conscience, and maybe part of that is a reflection that I didn't do a good job of communicating. And that came to a head at one of the special taxing districts, I think for Section 1. So why did I vote no? There's some issues that are stated in here that I don't think are clearly reflective, that I think need to be worked on. And maybe if they're worked on in second reading, they can be addressed. But I wouldn't have this opportunity unless we brought this item back and discussed it. So I was just playing by the rules. And you're doing the same thing. I don't mind having another special call. But I want to vote yes, and I want it to be what I expect and what we promised. And I just don't see that reflected here. So it's still going to get a no vote for me.
All right. I mean, obviously, I'll go back to what I said. Passing it on first reading just moves it along. If you pass it on first reading as is, then I'll be more than happy to sit with each and every one of you and go item by item, any concern that you have. If you have a concern, we can discuss it, we can talk about it, and we can make the adjustments. We can, whatever recommendation you have. There are some of the concerns that you had have been addressed in here. So, and that's, I wish, I would have had the opportunity to discuss it, over the last week or so. But I can tell you that some of the concerns that you had didn't fall on deaf ears. I mean, we looked at the concerns that you had. Some of them were able to be implemented, some of them were not. But I welcome the opportunity to do it, and I think that we can do it, and we can find the perfect place between first and second reading. What I ask is that you pass it on first reading, because otherwise, the STDs, unless we call, like you said, a special call to handle first and second reading, I would ask that you pass it on first reading, and then I'll be more than happy to sit with each and every one of you who have a concern, and we can address it and correct it for second reading.
Any further discussion, Vice?
Councilman Collazo, I completely agree with you. And some of the concerns are there. The reason why I agreed to open it up is just because of the deadline. But you've championed this very, very incredibly, and I'm gonna refer to you on what you think. If you want to do a special call and do that as the first reading and hammer it out prior to that, I'm 100% in support, or if you want to do it today and hammer it out afterwards. You've championed this. I'm with you 100%. The only reason is I didn't want it to go back to the county. That's the reason why I was agreeable to motion it to open it. I also voted no. But, you know, we'll refer to you on that, or Councilor Ruano, I know has worked diligently on it as well. So whatever path you want to go, educate us and lead us and let us know so we can vote accordingly of what your opinion is. But there's concerns in here, and I completely agree with you, that need to be addressed prior to it going back. My scare is that it reverts back, as the manager says, to the county, and that's what we wanted to avoid. So whatever decision you want to make, please let us know so we can get some direction.
Yeah, I don't want anybody to think I threw it out there as a scare tactic or trying to twist anybody's
Not
arm.
at all. Not at all,
It's
Mr.
just
Manager.
reality. It's just a fact. It's a
No.
deadline that we have to live
Right.
by. And just as another point to consider, and that's why I think it's cleaner and easier if we pass it on first reading tonight, and then we can modify the up and down. We can make it, completely amend it for second reading. But for second reading, ordinances on second reading have different advertising requirements, so we just got to make sure that we have the requisite number of days in there to be able to advertise it appropriately.
Any further discussion, council? And I just want to say the reason I voted no on it, one of the main reasons was last year, and before this administration was in place, I talked about having a similar process for involvement with the council, similar to what we do with our committees. Our committees are $200,000, right, in our budget, and the special taxing districts are $2 million worth of services that we're doing, and those are things that I really wanted a similar. I discussed it. We talked about it on the days. This is over a year ago. Everybody kind of said yeah, and I know you weren't here, but I know that process never occurred, and I want to see that continue to happen going forward, and I think hopefully it gets addressed next year.
Mayor, if I may. Obviously, everyone except for me voted no. I don't think this is perfect, but I had already spoken to the manager about the issue that we have with the timing and first reading and the time we'll have between first and second reading to get it right. So I didn't vote yes because I think this budget is perfect. I voted yes because for the reasons that the manager is stating now, which is we have the time between first reading and second reading to make the changes, talk to the residents, and bring on second reading what we want to pass. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Seeing no further discussion, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Collazo.
No.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Ruano.
Yes.
Councilmember Alvarez.
Yes.
Councilmember Dieguez.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mayor Sid.
No.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We are back on to item 12A, which is a public hearing. It's an ordinance in second reading. Mr. Attorney.
An ordinance granting to Florida Power and Light Company, its successors and assigns, an electric franchise, imposing provisions and conditions relating thereto, providing for monthly payments to the town of Miami Lakes, Florida, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. Mr. Manager.
Yes, this is probably the most talked about item in the last 6 to 8 months. So there's no mystery here. As we know, the town has relied on the FP&L franchise that we had under the umbrella of Miami-Dade County for our general operations for many, many years. And we now, that Dade County franchise is expiring, and we need to establish our own standalone agreement between us and FP&L. And our partners in this agreement, FP&L, they have representatives here and are available to answer questions if need be. But what's before you is a recommendation for a 6% FP&L franchise fee. At the end of this item, you'll see a listing of South Florida municipalities that already have their own agreement directly with FP&L. All of the South Florida or Miami-Dade County municipalities are either 5.9 or 6.0, except for the city of Miami Beach, who has 5.29. As we've spoken before, this year, because of the way that Miami-Dade County's FPNL franchise was paid in advance, there's a dramatic budgetary impact from the transition from being under the Dade County agreement to having our own standalone agreement. So based on our accrual system, we'll be able to recognize only 4 months next fiscal year from this new agreement. There'll be monthly payments. If there is a 6% franchise fee agreed to, it still will represent over $400,000 reduction in FPNL franchise from the current fiscal year to next fiscal year. So anything less than that would just exacerbate that lost revenue. So I believe that's it. I'm open to answer any questions.
So before we get into questions, discussions, any motions, so we can get into all that, to discuss it?
Motion.
Second.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any questions of the manager? Wait a second, it's a public hearing. Any?
Just one more point. On first reading, the paragraph was not in the agreement that allowed this council to annually make a change, and it's now in your new version of the agreement. Once, and it's the language that FPNL had agreed to, it's once every calendar year, this council can make the decision to make a change in the rate.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. This is a public hearing. Anyone from the public wishing to speak on item 12A, which is an ordinance in second hearing, in second reading?
Martha Mendez, 7,000 Glen Eagle Drive. I've been through all the special calls, the workshops. This particular thing, this franchise fee, is the poster child for the most unjust fee you can lay on the residents of this town. You already take 10%, and now you want an additional 6%. Currently, I'm paying 2% on this franchise fee. I'm not going to tell you why you should do this. I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't do this. Because the people out there watching this, they have no idea that you're stabbing them in the back. And you are. They don't understand the franchise fee. They don't get a trim notice like the ad valorums. They're going to get stuck with this because you decided, by the way, just a little while ago, you decided how to spend 3% of it. And you haven't even approved the 6. The 6 you don't need. You won't get it until later on in the year. Learn to live without it. You already took care of it in the ad valorem. Don't do the franchise fee. It is a stab in our backs.
Thank you, Mita. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak on this item? Anyone else from the public wishing to speak on this item? Anyone else from the public wishing to speak on this item? Public comments. It's going once, going twice. Public hearing is closed. Where you have a motion and a second on item 12A. Council, any discussion? Seeing none?
I'll jump in.
Councilman Diegues and the Vice Mayor. Got it. Yes, Councilman Diegues.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Manager, I just had a question as part of the table that's attached here to the item. I noticed Doral is missing. Are they planning to get a franchise fee, do you know? Or, because I know Palmetto Bay, right? They were also thinking about it at one point. Were they not?
Yes, sir. Palmetto Bay had passed an ordinance with a lower rate, but I know in discussions with FPNL, they, in addition to a lower rate, had put in a whole bunch of other clauses that the FPNL was not going to accept their agreement, so they were going to probably be sent back to the drawing board. Doral The FP&L can probably give you a better understanding. But what happened is all of the municipalities that incorporated after 1990, which were 9 of them, were working under the umbrella of the Miami-Dade County franchise fee. So they are all going through this process and establishing their own individual franchise fees. Some of them have already done it. Some of them are in the process, like us, and some of them maybe even further behind us. So,
Thank you for that clarification. And Armando, I don't know if you can provide a bit more light as far as where the status is with places such as Doral and any of these other municipalities that incorporated after 1990.
Hi, good evening. Monica Barnes, legal counsel for FPL 700 Universe Boulevard, Juno Beach, Florida. Right now, out of the 9 cities, 7, if your ordinance is adopted tonight, we will have 7 that have been approved. With Palmetto Bay, it is correct. We did not agree to the terms, and we are negotiating a new agreement, and that will be brought back before their village council in September, and we are currently negotiating with Doral.
At what rate is, again, let's say Doral, for example, negotiating at?
Well, we haven't had first reading yet, but just in negotiations, we've provided them with all of the information that you have here today. I know that previously with Palmetto Bay, they entertained a rate of 3.5%, but again, that's coming back.
Thank you for that clarification. And this is more of a statement to you, Armando. I just realized that maybe with the last amendment I was going to try and tack onto our ordinance on the other item, the annual council vote was not about renewing the franchise fee. I just want to make that clear. It was just simply about, as far as
setting the rate.
Yeah, exactly, setting the rate. Just want to clarify that. I don't know how you took it, but I just want to make sure that was clear.
Absolutely.
And I'll turn it over to the Vice Mayor at this time to make his remarks.
Vice Mayor?
No, I just, I understand Ms. Mendez's concern, but, I'm looking at the big picture of reference to everybody paying their share, right? And so, I mean, after talking to a few tax folks, it's not that much difference that you're getting and that you're going to get on the discount or on your tax break for the increase in millage. So my question is, and if you don't mind, Mayor, I'd like to bring Ms. Mendez back, is I'm trying to understand, are you okay with the millage increase rather than the franchise fee increase? Right.
Vice Mayor, we won't go, it's a public hearing, and she's participating in the process, but we can reopen the public hearing.
I got the answer. I don't see it that way. I see that, I think we can come up with a happy medium of the franchise fee and maybe a small millage increase. Either way, I think that we need to come up with a number that's palatable to this council and to the town. But I think that everybody everybody needs to participate. And on the FP&L side, all the renters participate, and you have people that are using services that don't pay the tax on it. Their property owner pays the tax, but they get every service as a renter, but don't pay the tax. Although, they pay it indirectly, but it's not a direct hit. So that's just my concern on not taking the excess revenue off the franchise fee.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilman Alvarez, and we do have the clock on this one, Council, so you have your 3 minutes. You have your 3 minutes for your main discussion, then a 1-minute rebuttal, and then we're done. So we're still on our main discussion. I think we've only had two of us speak, Councilman Dieguez and Councilman Vice Mayor Rodriguez, so they only have a 1-minute rebuttal left. Councilman Alvarez.
Mr. Manager, you provided the information here of other municipalities and what their rates are and when they went into the effective agreement date and the young lady mentioned that we are the eighth municipality that's going through this current negotiation now. Do you have any information of the current municipalities, aside from the town of Miami Lakes, that have come into an agreement for a franchise fee, with the exception of Palmetto Bay that she just mentioned was at a 3.5? Do we have that information? Have they come to that agreement, or?
Yeah, originally there were 9 cities that were under the Miami-Dade umbrella. There are 6 that have already reached agreement and passed ordinances. We would be the 7th. Palmetto Bay would be, and Doral would be 8 and 9. So if Armando or Monica can speak to the other 6 cities and what rates they set, I think is the council member's question. The other 6 cities that were previously under the umbrella of Miami-Dade County that have already passed their ordinance on second reading, if you know what those 6 cities set their rate at.
I believe it's either 6 or 5.9. Aventura was at 5.9. Yes. I know Key Biscayne was at 6. Key Biscayne was at 6. Miami Gardens at 6.
Color Bay I know was 6.
6, yes. If I recall correctly, Aventura is the only city that's at 5.9%. And again, like I mentioned, it looks like Palmetto Bay, they'll be bringing it back just to start the whole process over. So I'm not sure where they're going to land. Yeah.
So of the 6 cities, council member, 5 of them set it at 6, 1 of them set it at 5.9.
Councilman Alvarez, are you yielding the floor, or you're still? Thank you, Councilman. Any further discussion, council? Anybody else would like to discuss this? You're about to waive your ability to have your 3 minutes. Go on. Councilman Collazo.
Thank you. And my colleagues and the manager, and I think everybody here knows kind of where I sit with this issue, because I've spoken at great length on where I come, and I just wanted to make my peace with the issue. But prior to doing that, I do want to make a comment to FPL, and in particular to you, Armando. You have been a professional. You have always been there to answer any question. You have been there even in moments of crisis for our administration when we were not clear on what your position would be. And I just want to thank you for that guidance throughout this process.
Thank you, Councilman.
And want to thank you for your professionalism. With respect to the franchise fee and why I have been such a proponent of trying to keep it level over the past however many months we're going through this, I understand that we're going through a fiscal crisis. I understand that we need this money to make sure that we have services in place to meet our customers' needs. But I also understand that we've managed equal fiscal crisis and we've come out on the other side better. I also understand that there's safeguards, right? Whether we set this rate at 3% or 6%, we can always revisit that rate. I rather take a conservative approach to this. And I understand that the position that we're in now, but I also understand that I have seen many times us put in a very similar position, very dire straits, and then we deal with surpluses at the end. What I don't want to do is get into a situation where we're trying, and you can see the effort that Councilman Dieguez went through, we're trying to put restraints on the money because we haven't proven to ourselves that we've had that restraint in the past. And that's my concern. I'd rather set it at a lower rate, and when we need to, revisit it and set it at a higher rate after we've exhausted every possible recourse, because that's what I've heard from my constituency. I have heard that we understand if you need to do it, but exhaust every possible measure. And that's the reason why I have taken that position with this issue. But again, I just wanted to put my comments on the record, and I wanted to thank you for your time and being a professional. Thank you, sir.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Councilman
Mr.
Collazo.
Mayor.
Councilman Rodriguez.
Yep. First of all, I want to commend this council on doing something that, from everyone that I've heard, was pretty unprecedented. We had several sunshine meetings to go line by line on these budgets and cut all of the fat. I mean, this budget right now is about as lean as we could get it and still maintain the level of service that our residents expect. Yes, there were certain austerity measures that were proposed by the town, and I, for one, was not in favor of them, including not hiring 2 additional police officers, not trimming trees for an entire year, not mulching the parks, not fixing the sands on the lakes. Those are things that I think our residents expect us to do. Those are the bare bones of what our job is to keep the quality of life of the residents up to their expectations, which is why, and I understand what you're saying. You're right. You've said it in the sunshine meetings. There have been times where there's excess funds. Staff is telling us that is not going to happen this time. Because of the budget crisis that we're in, the budget proposal that we've been given does not forecast those excess funds. In fact, we've had to cut into, even with the 6%, we've had to cut in $150,000 for the sinking fund is not going to get put into the budget this year. We're taking $420,000 from the MLOP capital funds and moving them to the general fund. And again, I'm repeating, this is if we do it 6%. We still have to move $420,000 and move the $150,000 from the sinking fund. We can't do it this year. In addition to that, we have a fund balance, our little war chest. We have to take $86,000 from there. So again, those are all measures that we have to take even at 6%. So to think that we can go through this year and not approve the 6% doesn't fall in line with the information that we've been given. So that's why I will be in favor of the 6%, and I will be in favor of looking at it once this is over and we've replenished the MLOP capital fund, we've repaid ourselves for the sinking fund for this year, we've refunded the fund balance transfer, and we've made ourselves whole again, then we can lower it again. And that's why I think Councilman Dieguez's item of voting on it every year was perfect. Because once we've established ourselves and we're good, then we can vote on it to lower it once every calendar year, correct, Mr. Manager? Yes. Once every calendar year.
Yes, sir.
So based on the information, I don't think we have another option other than raising the millage. And I don't agree with a millage raise versus a franchise fee raise. I think the franchise fee, like I've said in the meetings, oh, my time's up.
We'll come back to you during rebuttal. So, on your first 3 minutes, anyone else on the first 3 minutes? Councilwoman Morano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo a lot of the sentiments up here. I've talked about this on our sunshine meetings. I think that we've debated this to death. I am not in favor of this 6%. I still think that we can do better. I understand wholeheartedly that we will lose a certain level of service. I understand that there are constraints that we have this year fiscally that we haven't had in other years, but I'm not comfortable at a 6%. I'm open to revisiting that number. I'm open to different scenarios. I know that we've talked about a lot of different scenarios. I feel that we can still do a little bit better, and I know that we're digging into a lot of funds that we don't want to be digging into, and I know that we would be losing services that we don't want to lose. But I think that our residents understand that we're not up here to raise taxes. We're not up here to milk residents for franchise fees and ad valorem taxes and other utility taxes. That's not what we're up here to do. We're going to tighten our belts and we're going to make it work just like we do at home. When we have financial crisis or constraints, we tighten our belts at home, and that's what I want to see here. I'm not prepared tonight to approve a 6%.
Thank you, Councilwoman Morano. We're to the 1 minute rebuttal. Anyone want to use their 1 minute rebuttal? Councilman Dieguez, and then we'll go to the Vice Mayor, then Councilman Rodriguez, who had some other thoughts that he didn't get to finish.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll move very, very quickly, and that is that I share a lot of the concerns that were echoed by my colleagues, Councilwoman Morano and Councilman Luis Collazo. I will be supporting this, though, with one caveat, and for one reason, too. The most persuasive reason, out of a few others that were given, the fact that it is not, that the millage rate is incredibly inequitable in terms of how it distributes its burden by comparison with the franchise fee, the level of control that you have with the franchise fee. My whole thing is with the litigation over the bridges. We just found out that Hialeah has rescinded their resolution as to the bridge park on 154th. I believe that this is going to escalate. There was an online poll done in one residence page that supported up to $1 million in order to fight this. And so I believe that this will be one way of making sure we have adequate resources, along with adding back cuts that are not included in the proposed budget that we had discussed at the Sunshine meeting. So with that, I will be supporting it at 6%. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Dieguez. Vice Mayor?
I completely agree with you, Councilman Dieguez, and with all due respect, Councilwoman Romano. I don't think we're milking anybody. I think that the services, that the residents have always wanted a certain level of service in Miami Lakes. I'm not a fan of raising the millage. I'm not a fan of raising the franchise fee. And if there's a surplus, then we need to look at what happened, because we've been reassured by the manager, by finance, that there will be no surplus. But at the end of the day, listen, the tree trimming, the beaches, the services that we provide, and that's what makes Miami Lakes Miami Lakes. And I don't want to lose that image of Miami Lakes. And the fact that, listen, I'm willing to go 653, 654 on a 3-year basis or on a yearly basis. So either way, but
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilman Alvarez.
So when I met with the manager, one thing that was clear and evident when we spoke, and he provided different scenarios, was that there were options. There were options. There were, and that might be the word of the day. There was options with your fund balance. There was options in MLOP, and there were options that we worked late into the wee hours in the morning, doing up to 1.2 million of austerity measures. But in the scenario that he gave me, there were $400 and something thousand of austerity measures. So I'm not against the franchise fee, but when we're in a dire situation like this, since we have options, I feel comfortable directing the staff to find these options and look into them. And
thank you, Councilman Alvarez. And I apologize, but your 1 minute's over.
I'm sorry.
Councilman
Can I
Rodriguez.
get? All right. So what I was going to say was franchise fee versus real estate taxes. I think franchise fee allows us to get revenue from a different source than our real estate taxes. And the second point is going back to the austerity measures and tightening the belt. We've done that. We've done the tightening of the belt. This is about as tight as the belt can get without really losing the level of service that our residents expect. So had we just accepted the original budget and said, leave the budget as it is and then we'll go with a 6%, I wouldn't be in favor of it. But we've done our due diligence. We've cut the items that we could cut. We've not filled 2 positions. We've moved items from MLOP. We've created $478,000 in austerity measures, no sinking fund of $150,000. And even on top of that, we need the 6%. So I agree with going back and looking at it again every year. But for this year, I don't think we have another option.
Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez, and you finished with 1 second left. Any further comments?
I'm going to try to finish with 1 second left as well, and just wrapping up. We will have the opportunity to revisit this, Councilman Rodriguez, whether you set it at 6 or whether you set it at another number. We have the opportunity to make sure that that belt is as tight as possible. And I, quite honestly, have had a different experience than you, and you've heard me go over this example. And it's no poor reflection on this administration or anybody in the audience. But I have been told and I have seen in prior councils how every penny was necessary for there not to be a reduction in level of service. In that year, there was over $1 million in surplus. And then that money came right back to us, and we found a way to spend it. I rather err on the side of keeping the franchise fee at 3%, and then if we really see ourselves in a position to raise that, we have that opportunity come January.
Thank you, Councilman Collazo. No further discussion. There's none, Vice Mayor. No further discussion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Do I have a question of the manager?
Nope. Your 1 minute is done.
It's not discussion, it's a question of the manager.
It's, that per our rules, they would all included that. It's over. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. I have to stick to the rule. I mean, I did it for our residents. I have to do it across.
Mayor,
the board.
I'm okay. I'll just
Okay.
nominate to change the rules for next time because I think the manager has information that may be important.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Collazo.
No.
Councilmember Alvarez.
No.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Ruano.
No.
Councilmember Dieguez.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mayor Sid.
No.
The motion passes. Ordinance
Motion
in...
failed.
I'm sorry. The motion fails. Does not pass.
Point of personal privilege, Mayor.
Yes.
Through the chair to the manager. If the folks that on the winning side, the prevailing side of this, decide to open this motion again at a lower rate, what's the discussion that Councilman Collazo said we can revisit this in January?
Well, you have the ability to revisit this once every calendar year. If whatever rate, obviously now the rate's going to be zero, right? Because we have no franchise fee. So now the budget will have to be prepared with zero revenue from the franchise fee. So that's going to be the new normal, and the budget's going to reflect that. Now, if in the middle of a fiscal year, the council takes action and passes it and establishes a franchise fee or establishes it at some rate, then we can make mid-year adjustments. But obviously, we budget not on a month-to-month basis, we budget on a yearly basis, right? So,
All right, so-
if the franchise fee is set at zero, because we have no franchise fee, starting October 1, we have to consider that we're going to have zero revenue from the franchise, from the FP&L franchise, and we'll have to make the necessary adjustments, and the service levels will reflect that.
Mayor, I'm going to motion that we...
Like to make, oh, sorry.
No, it has come from the prevailing side, so...
Oh, you're right.
Like to make a motion to set the FPL franchise fee at 3%.
I'll second.
Any discussion, council?
Yes, I have a question to the manager.
Oh, wait
If
a
we
minute.
set
Hold
the,
on. Don't you have to open the item
no,
again?
second.
Before you... No. That was just a motion to change the percentage.
No, that was a motion to
To
reconsider.
The motion wasn't to reconsider. The motion was to change the percentage. So we need
Well,
a motion to...
make a motion to reconsider the item. Second, it's already seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
I'd also like to make a motion to set the franchise fee at 3%.
I'll second.
Second.
All right, discussion. Now, and I'll start with my discussion. I don't agree with 6. I don't agree with 3. I think these are numbers that are just thrown out there. I think there is a happy medium. I think it's an absurdity to even talk about raising the ad valorem. Ad valorem is a pure absurdity. Low-income seniors should not be paying ad valorem, and it is. I'm gonna give people an example of why ad valorem is an insanity, and I'm gonna use our town attorney. Town attorney makes good money. Town attorney owns a nice house. Our town attorney, because he lives, and I'm sorry, Raul, I'm using an example because I don't want to use, but since he's lived in his home for 30 years, he gets a major rebate. Now, the young person, whoever it may be, that buys a house next to him, is paying 5, 6, 7 times the amount that he pays for the same exact service. That's like going to a McDonald's, and you go buy a hamburger, and they tell, hey, no, you got it for $1, but the next guy gets it for $7. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. And a lot of folks I hear that, hey, no, we want ad valorem increase. It's because who's going to pay the largest amount of ad valorem? Are the new people moving in? And hey, I already said it, low-income seniors should not be paying ad valorem. But everybody else, I mean, that disparity is big. There should be, it cannot, just because somebody comes up to, because I'm willing to pay 3, or I'm willing to pay, I think there has to be a rational discussion. I don't think it's 6. I don't think it's 3. I'm not going to vote for 3. I didn't vote for 6. But I do think there's somewhere in the middle that makes a rational thing. Everybody wants infrastructure up here. Everybody wants all these things. And yes, we have lowered the level of service in this town previously. Tree trimming used to be always on a major yearly basis, almost on every street originally. It got moved back, then went back to a 3-year cycle. Yes, a bunch of things that happened throughout the years. The level of service has gone down. But it is, and I got a minute and 5 seconds. Is it 6? I voted no. Is it 3? I'm going to vote no again. I think there's a rational part because I'm not going to raise ad valorem. Ad valorem is the one, it's terrible. There's a motion on the table first, so we'll take that up. I'm going to vote no on that. But I do think there is a better number out there that is not 6 and is not 3 and takes care of all of our issues overall. So just for the record, I'm going to vote no on 3 also. Councilman Dieguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
For the 3 minutes.
I guess what my question then would be is, I understand that, and honestly, I would agree with you. One thing I couldn't get into, since I only had a minute, was that obviously I would want to reduce the franchise fee from the 6% as quickly as possible. It's partly why I wanted to do the yearly votes, right, to force us to consider what the appropriate rate is. At this time, the only information I have is that we need 6% to get over this year's hump, and that at 3%, that's just what we normally take in, and that perhaps we can talk about 3% next year. But of course, as you said, we're always hearing how we want more money for infrastructure, for sidewalk repairs, for street repaving, etc. So I guess with all that said, if it's not 6, if it's not 3, I ask you to please consider making an amendment then to the motion at a rate that you think would work, because I think the manager needs something to work with. We know that if we go to 0 with the franchise fee, we're going to have to look at raising or keeping the ad valorem rate at the whatever rate it was that we set it at the last time as the initial rate, which I thought we were always going to probably bring down was the goal, knowing that we would at some point adopt some type of franchise fee revenue. So I would just ask you to please consider a number in the alternative to put out there as an amendment to Councilman Collazo's motion.
Well, I can't discuss it now. Discuss in rebuttal.
Okay.
Councilman.
I think it's important to realize that the franchise fee calendar runs different than our budget calendar. The franchise fee calendar runs May to June. Our budget runs September. So if we are only going to be collecting starting in May, correct? Or June. Starting in June is when we start collecting the 6%, which is why it needs to be 6% in the next year's budget, because we are not going to get the first half of that money. So that's the reason why we have it at 6%. I understand what everybody's saying. We don't want to raise the franchise fee. And Mayor, with all due respect, the discussion was had at the Sunshine meeting. We looked at the budget. We looked at the amounts that we needed to cut. We looked at the funds that we needed to move around. We looked at the items that what I thought were things that we didn't want to do away with. At least in my opinion, are things that I don't want to do away with. So in this year, if we go from June to the end of 2020, we can look at it again in January of 2021, which is what Councilman Dieguez's proposal was. And we're only going to be paying the 6% from June of 2020 to essentially December, assuming we don't want to change it, we change it in January. June to December. And that's to make up for the shortfall that we are going to have from January through May. That's why it needs to be 6%. It's not that we're asking for more money. We need the money to cover the costs that we have because we're not going to have a franchise fee for those first 5 months of the year. This is not us trying to milk the residents. This is us trying to get the amount of money that we are used to receiving. The problem is we're only going to have half a year to collect it, which is why we have to do 6%. So hopefully, I wish I can reel over my minute to the...
Any further? Councilwoman Ron.
Mr. Mayor, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I don't think that 6 is the number, and I don't think that 3 is the number either. However, I think that this council as a whole has taken a new approach, and part of the exercise of revisiting this budget and nitpicking at every line item led us all to kind of change our mindset. And we've taken a more back-to-basics approach on our budget, and we're looking more at sidewalks and infrastructure and concentrating more on what the residents are asking for instead of looking at other things that perhaps now may not be the right time to go on those ventures. The reason why our level of service was better years ago than it is today is because our government has grown. Our staff has grown, our location has improved. All of these things come with price tags. And for better or worse, our level of service is now more geared towards, staffing issues and paying for this beautiful building and maybe not trimming trees as often as they used to be trimmed. And I do remember the years. I've been living in Miami Lakes for many, many years, and I do remember when the trees were trimmed regularly and the drains were vacuumed regularly. That's not happening now. That being said, that level of service had deteriorated way before we entered into this financial constraint that we're in right now. So for me, I do not feel comfortable saying, okay, well, let's expand so that we can improve that level of service. It should have been better way before. I'm open to a different number if the mayor would like to amend it to a different number. I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate that we are all looking at this in a different light. I think that moving forward, we will do wonderful things with infrastructure because that's what we're concentrating on now. We've shifted our focus.
Any further discussion? Vice Mayor.
Listen, I completely understand, and the reason why I went with 6 is because we had the opportunity to do it in a 6-month increment and look at the 6-month distance of trying to recover losses. Prior to 2012, this council and the budget of this town was over $21 million. $6 million were cut from the millage rate between 2008 and 2012. In those 4 years, they sliced off $6 million off the budget. And that's why the trees were rotated to every 3 years. Yes, we do have a bigger home, but we did pay rent. Some extraordinary amounts of rent in some places. Was this my choice? No, this was done prior to me being elected. I would have preferred a building already built and purchased, and we had a great opportunity to do that, but that wasn't on the dais then. For years, I kept saying, we cannot continue to slice and dice the millage rate. It's going to come to haunt us one day. Here is the haunt, right? So, I mean, with all due respect to Ms. Mendez, I understand. I'm not a fan of the millage rate increase because it does affect those new purchasers and people that don't have all the breaks. As I said in the last workshop and I said in the last meeting, residents have come to me and said, I can control my energy consumption. I can decide how much I want to do it, and and use my energy in my way and pay the franchise fee according to what I use and not use. And that was brought to me by residents. But those cuts and all those changes were made prior to 2012 because the town cut $6 million in ad valorem tax. Then they were told, listen, one day this is going to come to haunt you. And this town hall wasn't even there yet. and this was hashed out and talked about. So, you know, I'm not a 6 person, but I'm willing to change from 6 to 5 or to 4.5. I'll motion that to get this moving. Obviously, we're stuck between 3 and 6, and everybody says 3 is not the number and 6 is not the number, but nobody comes up with a number. So let's go with, you know, I'll motion to do 5.5 and see where we go from there. Hopefully I'll get a second. 5.5 to start.
There's a motion on the table, council, at 5.5.
I'll second for discussion.
Discussion, Councilman Rodriguez. On just the 5.5, the amendment.
I understand what we're trying to do. We're trying to find the number. But we looked at the numbers during the Sunshine meeting. We looked at what would we have to do to the millage rate if we don't do a 6%. And I don't know about you guys, I was not in favor of raising the millage rate because we didn't get the 6% franchise fee for the 6 months to cover the amount that we were not going to receive. So I'm not in favor of just picking a number up here without having actual financial statements and what it's going to cost and how much it's going to generate and what the change in the millage will have to be. I'm not in favor of just pulling a number. We've done the homework on 6%. We know what we have to do at 6%. We know that we can look at it again after the 6 months are over. Councilman Collazo, if something happens at the end of this fiscal year and there's revenues left over, well, guess what? We'll push back the amounts that we took from ourselves, which is the MLOP, the sinking fund, and the fund balance. If we have those reserves for this year, because this is the first year that the manager has this new budget, if there are any reserves, we'll start the payback process. So then when we go to look at it again in 6 months, we don't have to pay ourselves that amount. You know, but I think we do ourselves a disservice sitting up here picking a number at random when we've already looked at the numbers with the manager, we've looked at the numbers with the finance department. We know what we're going to have to do at 6%. If you're willing to take a smaller number, we just need to appreciate what that's going to mean. And if the manager can tell us, if we vote at 5.5, what's the amount that we're not going to generate, and what do we need to cut? Because that's what's going to make the determination as to whether I'm in favor of it or not.
Is that a question to the manager? So on the 5.5, Mr. Manager.
Well, we had gone through the exercise of identifying 1.24, I think, cuts. We had put forth a proposal. The council went through the exercise at the Sunshine meeting of looking at, and then you made different recommendations, some add backs, some takeaways, and we came up with the same number. That number of 1.24, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 1.24, represented severe cuts. And anybody who says that belt tightening was not going to represent a reduction in service, that phone calls with people with issues were not going to be able to be addressed, is not correct. I mean, I would be irresponsible if I told you, yeah, everything's great, we'll cut $1.2 million, and we'll be able to provide even better service than last year. That is a mistake. That's a fallacy. So I can't responsibly look you in the eye and tell you that that's going to happen.
Madam Clerk, I'm sorry, when I asked the question, I had 1 minute and 7 seconds left, so I'd like to reclaim my time.
So if the budget presentation, which was slated to happen after this, is built on it's predicated on a 6% franchise fee. So the recommendation of the budget that we have prepared to present to you tonight after this meeting is built on a 6% franchise fee, at least for this next fiscal year, at least 4 months of a 6% franchise fee. Any number less than that, we'll have to tweak it. Now, obviously, I wish I had, days between today, this decision, and being able, because the numbers I'm going to show you in the budget workshop now are no longer valid, because unless you have some reconsideration and pass a 6%, the numbers that we're going to show you are, obviously, there's a lot of the numbers that are still going to be accurate, but there's going to be some tweaks. And obviously, some of those tweaks mean added cuts, and those cuts would come from the list that the council finally endorsed at the end of that sunshine meeting. So it's a matter of, we'd have to compile that, and so I can't really tell you right now what that represents, but it would be $780,000 worth of cuts, which is what we would lose with no franchise fee.
Right, so we're being asked to pick a number, not knowing the amount that it's going to affect us and what items we have to cut in order to get there in a budget that we have to approve by next month. I think that's not fair to ask us to do that. It's not fair to the staff. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if we do the 6% tonight, can we change it before it goes into effect in June?
If I'm not mistaken, and FPNL, obviously, I'm asking you to ratify or to pass the agreement today for an agreement that won't go into effect until June 1.
Right.
So before the start of the agreement, I would say that would be your chip for the calendar year 2020, that you'd be able to make a change before it went into effect if you did it sometime before June the 1st, or even after June the 1st. You'd have contract years, fiscal years, calendar years.
And
so in
budgetary
calendar
years.
year 2020, you have an opportunity to make that change. I don't think there's anything in the agreement that stipulates that it has to be before the agreement goes into effect. So, but even then, it could be after post-June the 1st, you can make that one-time change in calendar 2020.
Mr. Council Member?
Yes.
Yes, you could only change it, according to our attorney, after it becomes effective.
Okay,
One-
so we can
one
change it. We can change it in July.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so why don't we set it at the 6%? We have from now until June to look at it again, see if we do have any money that comes up at the end of this fiscal year, or if we can decide on items that we're willing to cut before or immediately after the agreement goes into effect. We can do that at the end of 2020. But I think it's a disservice to us to have to put us on the spot up here and pick a number out of the sky without any financial backing.
Mayor,
Councilman Collazo.
Mayor, just to make
I'm
it
gonna-
clear, the motion's at 5.5, not 6.
No, 5.5.
When I put the number at 3, Councilman Rodriguez and anybody else that needs an explanation for why I put it at 3, it's because that's where we're at right now. We're essentially collecting 3%. It's not a number that I picked out of the air. It's not a number that I hold on, no. But I want to set the record straight, because apparently there may be some confusion on how I got to the number 3. And it's because that's what we're collecting from our people now. If we need to collect more, as we're hearing from the administration and we're hearing from our staff, we have that opportunity. It's the opposite of what you want to do. We have the opportunity come June to make the adjustment. Well, hold on a second. Are we getting that money today? Because this is an accrual basis. This is an accrual basis, right? That money's not going to be there until it hits the banks in June. If we see that levels of service are being sacrificed, we have the opportunity to shift monies around. How they've come back before this council time and time again. We've made budget adjustments, sometimes on consent. Not questioning, not batting an eye. We have that opportunity. It's the opposite of what you're coming around. So I just wanted to be clear why I was coming with a 3% number. I agree with you. What we're debating here, without having that information, I don't think it's the smartest thing to do. But why am I basing it on 3%? It's because that's where we're at right now.
Mayor, I get a minute to respond? Or?
Yes, but after Councilman Alvarez speaks,
Got it.
if you don't mind. He hasn't had a chance to speak with us. 3 minutes. No, just write down. You're a good attorney. Come on.
I agree with Councilmember Collazo. I think the direction to go in is to go through this exercise together. You know, like I said, we have some viable options here. Next year, we don't have an additional $200,000 from the bond that we had to pay this year from one year to the other. I think this is an exercise that after all the work that we've done with staff, with the manager, I want to go through this exercise, and you've referred to that as tightening the belt. You know, I run a $10 million budget at our school, and I wish I can have a Promethean board for every single classroom. And when we expanded last year and opened up a new building, we had the funding for it. But guess what? This year we didn't. And I had to find other options and other viable options to still provide the same quality of service and the same education that I vowed to give to the students and to the parents that attend our school. And I think this is the exercise that we need to go through. And if the 3% doesn't work, then I can stand up to our residents and say, at 3%, this is the quality of service you're going to get. This is the third best city to live in, according to the Miami Herald. But at 3%, this is what you're getting. And we'll hear it in the public comments. The residents will speak. Their voices will be heard. And at that point, if it is necessary to make an adjustment, then this town council, our staff, will discuss that. The easier option, and I get it, and I understand level of service, but to me, I like challenges. When we're put in front of barriers and obstacles, I like to try to overcome them. And this is an obstacle, and this is a barrier for this council, for this manager, for this town staff. And you know what? Once we get through this exercise, if the 3% wasn't the number, then I can sit here or stand here confidently and tell the entire town and its residents that at 3%, this will be the quality of service you're going to get. And if you're happy with it, then so be it. And if not, then we're going to have discussion of what that rate may have to increase to or may not. But I think it's healthy to not only demonstrate to ourselves after all the exercises that we've gone through these past 2 months, that we go through this exercise of 3% and see what direction it takes us and what measures we have to take as a council and as a town staff.
Thank you, Councilman Alvarez. Anyone else on their main 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Councilman Diegues.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to reiterate for all my colleagues that we're not just talking about whether we're going to be able to do these infrastructure things, to grind down sidewalks, to cut trees. The part that, again, convinced me to go to 6% for this particular year, and that I'm telling you all to keep in mind, especially those that were here at the beginning of the Pizzi litigation, is that we're about to probably escalate things when it comes to this bridge issue, right? That's not going to be cheap. And it's about making sure, in the words of one resident who spoke at the last meeting, to do whatever it takes to be able to make sure that we achieve victory. And victory never comes cheap. So I'm just asking everybody to keep that in mind. Now, whether we get that from the cutting side, which I definitely agree that there are things that we discussed in the Sunshine meetings that are not in there that, in my opinion, should stay in there for this year, I still just want to make sure that we go all in with full ammunition. And so that was what tilted me over the edge for this particular year at the 6%, and why I view this year as being particularly different because of the size of the litigation that we potentially are going to be embarking on. That's all I'm asking, whether it's at the 6% or whatever. All I'm asking is that there be a plan at some point on how we're going to make sure that we have the adequate ability to pay for the legal resources we need. We don't even know yet if perhaps Mr. Gastesi at some point may want to partner up with another firm just to add even more firepower. I don't know. But I'm just saying that, we need to keep that in mind, that this is a very unusual position we find ourselves that goes beyond just, whether the level of services for parks and all that will be the same or not. It's about are we going to be able to have enough resources to protect our quality of life on things that affect us on public safety, on economic development, because of course companies always factor in road congestion when they go to move to places. So just factor all that in, but especially the litigation aspect. Make sure that whatever we come out with here tonight that whether we do it from the cut side or from the revenue side, that we have adequate resources to see this through to the end on an issue that could be catastrophic for us if we are not successful.
Thank you, Councilman Diegues. Anyone else on their initial 3 minutes? Anyone else on their initial 3 minutes? Seeing none, we'll go to rebuttal. 1 minute, Councilman Rodriguez.
Councilman Collazo, I'm not saying you picked the number out of the air. I know what you were trying to do. But what I'm telling you is we won't get a balanced budget for the 2019-2020 if we don't have 6%. It just won't happen. There'll be items that we will have to cut that are way beyond what we had discussed during our sunshine meeting. Okay? So we will not get a balanced budget by September at 3%. Not going to happen. We will need to raise the millage in September in order to get a balanced budget for 1920. That's why at 6%, we can establish a balanced budget, and before the cost actually starts to accrue in June, we have the time to analyze what we need and what we can cut. And then in June, we can make the decision in July, to change it in July. And it's 1 month that we're talking about. I have no problem going through this exercise 1,000,000 times, and until we are satisfied with the level of service.
Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez. The 1 minute rebuttal on this, on the 5.5, seeing none. Councilman Collazo.
You know, when I went to EMO, one of the things I concentrated most on was on revenue sources, and I had an opportunity to, learn from some of the heads of government throughout the state. And the one thing that they said when they came up to the franchise fee is take as much as you can. Take as much as you can all day, every day, because as long as you can collect money under somebody else's name, do it. And I found that comment to be one of the things that struck a chord with me regarding this franchise fee. I also remember when this first came before the council, before our tightening, before we needed to go through any austerity measures, and the recommendation was the same, put it at 6%. And we had surpluses that year. There's always going to be a tendency to need more resources, whether you're a school administrator, whether you're a city manager, whether you're running a healthcare facility. I think we are the ones that control the purse strings.
I apologize, Councilman Collazo. I'll use my 1 minute rebuttal. The one thing that I didn't realize in my time in the Florida League of Cities annual conference was what the state of Florida does and what the city of Altamont Springs, two cities that have two entities that have AAA bond rating, have immense reserves. State of Florida keeps their sales tax steady every year, regardless of a good year or a bad year. They collect the revenue on a good year and they invest it. City of Altamont Springs keeps it flat no matter what, keeps it flat. They use it the good years. They have their reserves today are 30%, and a couple of years back they had 120%, and they paid everything off. They have zero debt. That's not our business model here, right? So it just historically that's not the way it is. That's why they're forced to get debt here. That was right because everybody wants to pay less, but you got to build out infrastructure. So I don't know. I hope there is consensus because everybody up here asks the town manager and asks staff for things every single day for our residents. So we'll see where we go. On 5.5, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
So the motion is, you're voting on the amendment to set the franchise fee at 5.5%. Councilmember Diegues.
Yes.
Councilmember Collazo.
No.
Councilmember Alvarez.
No.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Ruano.
No.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
No.
Mayor Sid.
No.
The motion does not pass.
We're back on to 3%. Councilman
Listen.
Collazo, any further discussion?
You're
I know
not
we
let-
had. Any further discussion on the 3%?
I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, you can.
Can I motion to put it at 6%, and then with the understanding that we will work from now until May of next year to try and cut it by July of 2020.
Is there any second?
I'll second it to allow discussion, although I think I know where it's going to go.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Hold on.
Yes.
Repeat the motion.
At 6%. And then to work,
6% with conditions that we will work to cut as much as we can from the budget, cut items, in order to get us to a number that we are all have a consensus on by effective July of 2020, which is 1 month after the effective date, which is the time that FPL says that we can change the franchise fee. And this will allow our staff to get a balanced budget on the books for 2019, 2020 without raising the millage.
can you repeat that again? Because I think Councilman Alvarez didn't hear it. I know he was,
Okay.
I'm not sure if you heard it.
The motion is to set the franchise fee at 6% with the condition that the council works from now until May to make a decision, because I believe we have to provide FPL with 60 days notice. So 60 days notice, so by
There is a
May,
notice provision, I believe it's 60 days.
right? There's a notice provision where we will advise them by
It's by June. You can do it by June.
June.
Yes.
Okay. So we will work together to set a number that all of us are satisfied with after looking at the financials. And from now until June, we will do that. And we will reassess it at that time. But this allows us, at a 6%, allows us to have a balanced budget on the books for 2019, 2020 without having to raise the millage.
Is there a second? Oh, there was a second already. Okay,
Correct,
Madam
yeah.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Dieguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Collazo.
No.
Councilmember Alvarez.
No.
Councilmember Ruano.
No.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
No.
Mayor Sid.
No.
The motion does not pass.
Mayor, I'll put a motion on the floor of 4.5.
Seeing no second,
Yeah, no second. I think we should just
Motion.
go, I move to call the question on 3%.
there's already a motion on 3.
No, but I'm moving to call the question, yeah. Correct.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll at the 3%. At the
Sorry,
original
to
motion.
clarify, we have a motion to set the franchise fee at 4.5.
No, at 3%.
Okay.
The motion right now is set, the original motion, we're back on there. There was no second on 4.5. We're back on to 3%.
Can I make a motion to an amendment to the 3%?
Yes.
An amendment to it. So just as Councilmember Rodriguez explained, I'm in the spirit of doing the opposite. Setting it at 3%, going through the exercise these next few months, leading up to June, and at that point, if we feel that we do have to raise it, then that's a decision that can come to the council to vote on. That's my motion. Pretty much the same what you said, but the reverse. Doing the
Yep.
voting on the 3% now, and my motion is to amend it to put it back to a vote in June after we go through this exercise. And at that point, if it's determined that it may have to increase, then that information can be brought to the council and we can vote on the day as.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question for the town manager.
Wait a second. There hasn't been a second, so his motion dies. We're back onto the main motion.
But his motion was the same motion as Councilman Collazo, or it was amended to have the conditions? Got it. Okay.
I'll second, Council.
Okay.
Okay.
Councilman Rodriguez.
Okay. Mr. Manager, if we were to set the budget with a franchise fee of 3%, would we have a balanced budget by September?
We would have to go back to the drawing board and cut another $390,000 from our budget.
Is that the exact number, 390,000?
Yes,
we have to
because
make
we
that
were projecting 780,000 at 6%, so half of that,
because it's 6 months of a franchise fee. for
Well,
the,
we were projecting 780,000 for 4 months
right.
at 6%. So the 4 months don't change. The percentage is the only thing that changes.
Right.
So half of 780 is 390, so that would be, we'd have to cut another $390,000 from our budget.
And by when do we have to set that 2019, 2020?
Well, you have to
budget?
set it at the first budget hearing, which is September the 10th.
Okay.
And obviously, that could be done from either side of the equation. It could be done with another $390,000 in cuts or any adjustments to any of the revenue streams.
May I ask what our procedural posture is? Did Councilman Alvarez's motion get a second? Okay,
Yeah,
that's
we're
right.
on,
From
we're on
Councilman
that right now.
Okay, thank you.
You did get second.
So on the amendment, all those in favor?
Aye.
No.
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 Madam Clerk, please call the roll on the amendment.
Councilmember Alvarez.
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Collazo.
Yes.
Councilmember Ruano.
No.
Councilmember Dieguez.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
No.
Mayor Sid.
No.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Madam
The
Clerk. We're back on to the
amendment.
main motion as amended. Madam Clerk, please call the roll on 3%. 3% as amended.
Councilmember Collazo.
Yes.
Councilmember Ruano.
No.
Councilmember Dieguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Alvarez.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mayor Sid.
No.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Moving on to resolutions. The Vice Mayor needs to step out. He has a family matter that he needs to take care of. Thank you, Armando, and it seems that you'll be back very soon, so.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
We're on to resolutions. My resolution, I just want to make a motion to approve this. Congressman Diaz-Balart and Senator Rubio are working very hard on this. We hope to have a hearing on the Senate side on this issue, hopefully in the very near future. We'll see how that goes, and we're working diligently on the House side, hopefully to get a calendar soon. I know it's a little difficult because when the parties change, the whole structure changes. So I just want to make a motion to approve the resolution.
I'll second.
Madam Clerk, any discussion on this? No. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Item 13A, Councilmember Collazo.
Yes.
Councilmember Alvarez.
Yes.
Councilmember Dieguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Ruano.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez is absent right now. Mayor Sid.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're on to Councilwoman Ruano.
Mayor,
Yes, Councilman Alvarez.
I'd like to recuse myself from this new business item as the Mayor Carlos Hernandez sits on the board, actually is the board chair for the school that I work at.
Thank you, Councilman Alvarez. Don't eat all the food in the back.
Mr. Mayor, when Councilwoman Rano's done, I would like to say something on this item as well.
Councilwoman Ruano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be brief. I know that we are running very, very late. Recently, we have been engaging in talks with our neighboring municipality, the city of Hialeah, regarding the opening or not opening of two bridges that cross over I-75, one on 170th Street, one on 154th Street. Tensions have gotten heated, and comments have been made that I think are unbecoming of elected officials. I want to direct the town manager, and before I continue, I want to let you all know, if you've read my item, that I will be striking the last sentence regarding the press release. I'd like to direct the manager and the legal department to draft a resolution. I've been working with the legal department. I think they've done a wonderful job so far. I think that we all have, on the dais, we have a preliminary resolution. I'd like to memorialize the comments that we've said to one another, the statements that I've made on the dais, condemning any derogatory comments that are said about our residents. I think that we need to set examples as elected officials. We need to set examples. We need to be the buffers. We need to be the ones that kind of, put the cold cloth on the hot pot and bring the tensions down and not exacerbate situations. The situation that we are discussing is strictly related to the opening of these bridges, strictly related to traffic congestion. It has nothing to do with animosity among residents, among neighbors. And so I want to memorialize the fact that we all share that thought, and that we would prefer that elected officials on both sides, residents as well, that we keep our comments civil in the future.
Council, is there a second? Wait, there's public comments. Just come on up. I see another one back there too, just come on up.
Martha Mendez, 7000 Glen Eagle Drive. Maybe the comments made by the Mayor Hialeah, maybe they just didn't apply to you. But they applied to somebody in this town. And if they apply to somebody in this town, then they apply to you. You might think you're not part of the racist Cubanos Arrepentidos, but you are. And you have to defend the racist Cubanos Arrepentidos, and I know you didn't want to say that, but I can get away with it. Because it's hurting somebody in this town, and it's demeaning, and it's debasing, and it cannot be tolerated. If it was just the one time, okay, let it ride. Don't pay attention. 2 times. We're getting a little bit out of control here. 3 times, the man is not going to stop. So we'll just have to put something together that says we're not in agreement, it's not personal, you just have a big mouth. Thank you.
Thanks, Mita.
Marcus Gutierrez, 7757 Northwest 169 Terrace. First of all, as many of you know, I live in the farthest northeast corner of 170th. And the opening of that bridge, which we all know we probably are behind the 8 ball, is going to directly affect me in that bottleneck. Now, last meeting, I was very proud of the entire dais because everybody came together. All you guys come from different backgrounds and have different opinions. I think those comments made them look very foolish and very silly, and I think all of you made factual comments that everybody, not only on the dais, has Hialeah background, has Hialeah friends, has Hialeah family members. But in my opinion, I think we shouldn't add fuel to it, and we should focus all our efforts on the issue and leverage the county to the issue at hand, which is how financially it's going to impact us if they open those bridges. We talk about budgets and we talk about infrastructure. I think everybody knows what's going to happen if those bridges open on 170th, where that traffic is coming. And we're going to have to pay for those roads, and we're going to have to talk about how we raise those funds. So I think we don't take his bait. I think he wants to distract the issue that he's planned very poorly in Hialeah, and he wants to make this about Miami Lakes. And I think we stop fueling that fire. And we are better people. We are educated people, and like I said, we all have Hialeah roots. So I think that when ignorant comments are made, when in my opinion, when you don't add fuel to that, and I think the more he talks, the more foolish he becomes. Okay? And I think we should focus and channel all our energies in the legal battle ahead, right? And start leveraging the county and start talking to the county and focus on the issue, not on this nonsense anymore. And again, the more he talks, the more foolish he becomes. I don't think we need to keep fueling that fire. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Marcus.
Claudia Luces, 8220 Menteith Terrace. I am in support of this agenda item for various reasons. Doesn't take away from the fact that we're dealing with this issue about the bridges, but I think that those inflammatory statements have to be met with a response, a unified and official response from this town. Do I believe they're ignorant, inappropriate, etc.? I do. And it doesn't take away from the message. It just addresses it. Okay? We cannot allow, just like as a nation, we cannot allow people to speak inflammatory, to say things about us that are untrue, that are unbiased. The attack was on private citizens, not elected officials. And that is unacceptable. And you're right, we should keep things to what we have to deal with. We have to deal with the bridges. We have to deal with the fact that now we have Commissioner Diaz saying that he wants to take, ownership of 154. Okay? We do have to deal with these issues, but that doesn't take away from the fact that you all can take a stand. Everyone here can take a stand. And I have seen this council and previous councils take a stand on other issues. Show solidarity with your residents. Show that to the residents. Back up this town, because we are not that. And you know what? I think that one of the good things that has come out of this is that it has shown that the residents of Hialeah and the residents of Miami Lakes are looking for one thing, and that is for a government that will work for the people, period. Because we all have basic needs. That is what's come out of this. Nothing else. And to allow somebody else to dictate the narrative, it must be met with a response. Okay? We have a leader now that answers those threats. He meets it with a response. And I think that we need to do the same. We should not stay silent on this. And I don't believe that you're falling for anything. I just believe that you're just addressing an inappropriate comment. Thank you.
Any further public comments? Any further public comments? Any further public comments? Going once, going twice. Public comments is closed. I know we have a motion on the table, council.
I'm going to second for discussion. Councilwoman Morano, I understand who you're speaking for. I think you're speaking for all the residents that were here that night that applauded you when you spoke on this issue. But I think we need to be laser focused and not feed into that rhetoric. I'm going to tell you my concern. I don't want any distractions at this moment in time to sway or take away from the business at hand. And what I appreciate you doing is providing us with this draft resolution, which quite honestly does not single out any one elected official. It kind of speaks to everybody. Just saying, as we deal with this hot button issue, and as we deal with this, I would say, breaking point in our community, let's be civil about it. And I think it's a reminder, not just to our council, but to all councils, that we need to have civility. And I'm all in favor of civility. What I was not going to support, I was not going to support something that went out of its way to give further rhetoric to something that dissuades us from the argument. But from the resolution that I'm seeing here, it's just basically saying, let's focus on the issue at hand and let's work together as cities. Unless there's some other intent behind this, I don't see this, how it can be misconstrued as something else. When it was first listed on the memo, it looked like it was targeting a particular politician because of those comments, and I know that's why it's in front of us. And again, I had my concerns, but what's presented here now is something that forces us to deal with the issue at hand and really focus on what we're doing. I'd like to hear my comments. I'd like to hear my colleagues' comments on it because I'm on the fence. Again, I think we need to have a laser focus. And, there's some people that have a little bit more political savvy than I do. when it comes to matters as this, and I'll make my final decision based on their feedback.
Thank you, Councilman Collazo. Councilman Dieguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to just take a moment, though, to thank Councilman Morano and, for her trying to address, what were inflammatory comments. And as somebody who has been beaten up on Twitter multiple times, who has gone back and forth with people multiple times, stating her and restating her position and being called all sorts of things, listening or rather reading Miami Lakers be called all sorts of things, there are a few people that I would say have been as combative on behalf of the town of Miami Lakes as I have. I still, though, had issues with even going here with respect to any resolution or anything like that, because from a strategic perspective, looking at it that way, every second that we spend addressing, again, comments that were without or that was certainly out of proportion and are a misrepresentation of what I suppose he and others believe they are reading online. Every second that we are even talking about it is a second lost explaining our position to other people around the county. It becomes a tit for tat. That's why in politics, for example, usually the first move when you're attacked is not to immediately respond to something, right? It's to try and just let it die and remain on your message. And so that is why I had a strategic disagreement here, and why I'm glad you softened it by removing the press release aspect, which for sure would have been playing to the game that we are being baited into, because of course it's going to go back and forth, it's never going to end. But even with the resolution, I just think, for those of us that know these resolutions, we've gotten them before. Sometimes we may not even read them. No, based on the action that they took tonight with respect to the Bridge Park resolution, with respect to the resolution on 87th Avenue, it's pretty clear that would be the response they get. And I think our residents still know, even without a formal action, where we stand on this. Again, my remarks are all over Twitter. I'm sure there's somebody screenshotting those too. I just think that we need to just remain focused on the message, which is that this is a public safety issue for us as much as it is for them. And the reason why it's a public safety issue is because of the traffic congestion that goes on. And that all we are doing is shifting the problem from one side to the other, right? And for a side that, as we learned, does not really have the same level of urgency that we have for the same level of relief. So with that said, I just want to put my thoughts on the record, as I know there are many residents watching, and I just wanted to preserve those remarks for the future and also explain where I'm coming from.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Council, if you'd indulge me and I can get a little bit longer than 3 minutes, because I want to kind of give an explanation as to the history and my discussions with the press on these different
second.
issues. Yeah. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. So first, the comments are absurd. They're wrong. The vast majority of people laugh at it because when they see the face of who's fighting, us fighting the bridge. I'm the one on TV. The first Cuban-American mayor of Miami Lakes, raised in Hialeah. You know what I mean? People are like, this doesn't even make sense. So what happens? We have the facts on our side. 154, there's an interlocal agreement. It's a fact. 170th, there's an agreement to coordinate with the town. That's a fact. The traffic study shows there's an issue. That's a fact. Infrastructure has been done. That's a fact. So when I got calls from the press, nonstop, I've gone on about 12 between TV, radio, newspapers, 12, 13, 14, 15. When the mayor said what he said, which I laughed at, it's a joke, it's asinine, it's not, it's not right. I told the press, hey, don't take the focus off what the issue is. I'm the mayor of Miami Lakes. The entire council was born in Hialeah. 82% of our residents are Hispanic. I mean, and you hit it on the head, Councilman Dieguez. It's bait to change the discussion. And every time I went to the press, that was the first thing they asked. You know what I would say every time? I laugh at it. Guys, the real issue here is traffic, is infrastructure. You know what? And we're winning that battle. When we left the meeting here the other day, We laid out an incredible strategy, spot-on strategy, not only on the legal side, but even on the PR side. I've had people from Hialeah calling me, say, hey, you guys are absolutely right. There should have been infrastructure over there. It shouldn't be shifting traffic to our side. It shouldn't be. And I've had people appreciate the position that we've taken. Hey, you guys have taken the high road. You guys have laughed at these comments instead of, and I have gotten people who called me and said, Manny, you got to respond and say, hey, we're going to put a gantry, a toll on 67th Avenue. You got to go talk to the owner, Flanagan, to move Flanagan from Hialeah to Miami Lakes. I'm like, why do I even got to say it? If I start saying that, we lose. And that's, I see the resolution. What the mayor said was wrong. What the mayor said is ridiculous. I've said it multiple occasions. But every time I say that, guys, don't allow that rhetoric to change the topic. Because tonight, what I thought, when I first saw the item, when I first saw the agenda, I thought the newspaper article tomorrow morning was going to be, Town of Miami Lakes moves forward to Bridge Park. And then now, I got word already from Hialeah. Hialeah's rescinded the Bridge Park thing. They said they want to close 87th Avenue. Two things, 87th Avenue, the Bridge Park, they can't stop us on, right? But they want us to react to what they're doing to change that rhetoric. And I want to share that with you guys because I've gotten baited. They try to bait me already 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Every single time I go on the radio, every single time I was on a radio station the other day, the first thing they played was Mayor Hernandez's comments, you know, and immediately I laughed at it. Guys, it's a joke. Nobody takes it serious. He's absolutely wrong what he's saying, but nobody's taking this serious because the reality here, this is not an issue between residents of Hialeah. It's not an issue between residents of Miami Lakes. This is an issue of traffic. And you know what? We're winning the PR battle. Everybody's talking about traffic. Everybody's talking about transportation. The meeting they had on the other side the other day, 95% of that meeting wasn't even about the bridges. It was about infrastructure. It was about there needs to be sidewalks, there needs to be crosswalks, there needs to be lighting, there needs to be this, there needs to be that. So I share that because I've been in government for a long time, in a position that I've done communications. I did communications as an aide in the state for 7 years. I ran the entire office. I've ran campaigns, and there's always a tactic to kind of divert. When you don't have the facts on your side, what do people usually do? Look over there. You look over there, you know, so, and that's what they try to do. No, don't look over there. Look at here. And I'm telling you, we're winning that battle. So what I really don't want to do is give Carlos a victory because he wants us to respond. I'm being honest. He wants us to respond. He wants us to fight him on this. He wants me to call the press tomorrow and say, oh, hey, this guy, we're going to close down 67th Avenue. We're going to take Flanagan's out of Hialeah. That's the battle that they want. The more that we stay focused on the facts, we win. And again, I repeat, those comments are a joke. They're not right. They're a disservice to the entire community. But if we allow us to change that rhetoric, it is not a victory it does nothing for our residents because the Mayor of Hialeah is not going to apologize. If you guys have noticed the fights that he always takes on, when he dropped the pennies in the Ethics Commission, when he did all those things, he's going to double down, and the rhetoric is all going to be over there. We have to double down. We have to do the Bridge Park. We have to push forward these things. That has to be the rhetoric, and that's how we win. Because I'll tell you, every day I have people, and Josh sees it, I have people on Twitter making stuff up about me, trying to get me to react, saying things about me all over. I never react to it, because if I do, it's a disservice to my residents. And the more that me as the leader of the town, as I stay focused on the facts, and I laugh at the comments every single time because I don't even know if the Mayor of Hialeah even believes it, but they're saying it because they don't have the facts on their side. And I'm sorry to go on this discourse of these issues, but it's the fact. We have to. It's similar. I'll give you an example. The Roman Republic, when they were transitioning from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire was having issues with the aqueducts and their infrastructure systems. So what did they do? They would host gladiator fights, and they would throw bread into the crowd. So everybody, the public in the Roman Empire, they were all grabbing the bread and while the infrastructure was crumbling. That's been a tactic ever since then. So I implore my colleagues, and I think the way the resolution was written makes sense, but I implore my colleagues, we can't let them get a W. Because a W, being honest, a W is changing the rhetoric. A W is giving them the opportunity, giving Carl, the moment that we do anything, he's going to immediately, Hialeah's going to try to change it. No, it's on our side. We're breaking ground on the Bridge Park. You guys do whatever you want to do. We're breaking ground on the Bridge Park. We're going to take you to court. We're going to win. You guys can say whatever you want to say about Miami Lakes. You say whatever you want to say about me. I get stuff said every single day. I don't care. We're going to win these fights. But you're absolutely right. These comments are, and I'm just repeating myself because I want to make sure everybody understands. The comments are a joke. They're asinine. They're not right. I don't think anybody agrees with it. And now you're starting to see how the rhetoric is increasing. Now you saw somebody come speak today that wants us to denounce somebody else because of what they said about your homeschool and, you know what I mean, about HML and stuff like that. Like, are we now going to start every single time, I don't know if that's...
Don't touch my Patriots. Don't touch my American High Patriots.
Yeah, and I'm just, again, and I want to repeat it. The mayor of Hialeah is absolutely wrong with what he said about our residents. This is a distraction tactic. And I think we are winning the PR battle. We're winning the legal battle. And I'm sorry, I'm going to even have to, I'm sure they're watching and they're understanding what we're doing. But I've been doing this since day one, since the moment the press has been calling me. And I'm sorry I'm going on and on.
No, I just wanted to point out, though, too, that we've even already shifted the conversation. All of a sudden, they're talking about slip ramps. They're still talking about cross-connectivity. But the fact that they weren't even discussing and considering working with us to get ramps to I-75, and now they're talking about it, I think goes to show just how far we've already been able to shift the conversation to even discuss that, to discuss an alternative idea that's not just open up the bridges, end of story. I just want to point that out.
We have to stay focused, and I think the resolution is good, but we have to stay focused and not give them W's. I personally don't respond. Even on Twitter, I get things tweeted at me that are an absurdity. Josh sees them that are an absurdity. I don't respond because the moment I respond, they win. They got me. You know what I mean? They got me, and I don't even. I stay focused on them. You know what I did the next day after they were? Hey guys, that's great. We're breaking ground. So I don't know if you guys saw the thing. Breaking news. We're breaking ground on the Bridge Park. You guys do whatever you got to do. We're moving forward on the Bridge Park. So I just wanted to put that on the record because I've been working hard every single day on this issue behind the scenes to make sure that our position and our PR on that was crystal clear. But these are tactics that go back to the Roman Empire, especially when the Republic went away and the Empire went in. So I just wanted to make a mention of that. But yeah, Hialeah I'll give you an example. Hialeah just rescinded the Bridge Park resolution and just passed a resolution to close 87th Avenue. They can't do both. I mean, what I'm saying is it doesn't make a difference for us on both. They can't do it. But do we respond and say, hey, we're going to put a toll on 67th and we're going to move Flanagan's from Hialeah to Main Street? I've had people tell me to respond like that, and I'm like, why? That's giving them a W. So, no, I'm in. We have to stop this rhetoric. We got to call it out. I've called it out every single time that I speak. I laugh at it because it's not true, especially coming from somebody who's raised. I'm the mayor of Miami Lakes. I'm the first Cuban American mayor, and I was raised in Hialeah. I mean, everybody that watched those shows is like, this doesn't even make sense. That's why it hasn't gotten much traction. And everybody now, the entire rhetoric, the entire focus is on infrastructure. So I just wanted to, and I'm sorry I went on this discourse, but I truly believe in it, and I work on this every day to make sure that we're on good footing on that level.
All right. A couple of things on this point. I agree with everything that's been said on the dais, starting with Councilman Ruano and I agree with everything that's been said. But let's keep the talking points. These are the talking points that I want everyone to know. They're straightforward, they're to the point, they're facts, they're agreements. In January 2007, it was then City of Hialeah Robina that actually approached the town with a letter telling us that he was interested in closing Northwest 154th Street in order for them to continue on developing on the land that they had already annexed. After that, it was the City of Hialeah's attorneys, it was the council and the City of Hialeah that actually prepared the first draft of the agreement. Very few changes were made by the town of Miami Lakes to the original agreement. The only real change to that agreement was that we wanted the closures in place permanently. They agreed. They removed the 10-year clause, and they agreed. They signed that agreement with a resolution from their council. Then we signed the agreement. After that agreement was passed, then the city went forward with its development plans. The ones that are out there now, they went forward with those plans knowing that they had just agreed on closing 154th. Then after that, we both passed resolutions on making both sides linear parks. Those were all passed and in place. None of this is a surprise to the city planners on either side, to the county's planners, to the developers, and unfortunately for the residents. It was public record. They knew it. Unfortunately, too many of them, from what I'm hearing, misrepresentations were made to them by various people. And I'm not saying it was the government officials. I'm saying it was others in the private sector that represented certain things to them that they shouldn't have been representing. There is no surprise. This isn't socioeconomic. This isn't racism. This isn't anything like that. This is contractual agreements that were put in place for the very purpose or the very concern that is developing now. Exactly what is happening now was foreseen by this council or by a previous council and others for which we litigated. We settled the case based on that agreement. That agreement exists. I never hear it from the other side. Not one, but both agreements, although one of them they rescinded tonight, which was the resolution. That's why we wouldn't agree to just have resolutions closing Northwest 154th Street. This council and prior attorneys insisted that those agreements, that there be interlocal binding agreements, and that's why they're in place. Now, 170th, once again, that was done in 2003. That road transfer agreement before Hialeah annexed out there. And that agreement with the county specifically says that if you're going to improve or develop a road, the planning, design, and construction is the responsibility of Miami Lakes. That road is in Miami Lakes. Obviously, 154th is. So in order to do what they want to do, they've got to talk to us. And we're not saying we're going to keep it closed. That's not our position. Our position is consult with us. As the agreement states, you have to consult with us when you want to plan and design. I know I'm being repetitive. What we are asking is what's being planned and what is going to be in place. We don't want to do this before these are in place, because if not, it's going to be even worse. Entrance ramps on the Gratney at Northwest 87th and 67th. Underpasses at the Palmetto on 146 and 160 or 162. Right there. Okay. That is proper design and planning. This, once again, it's not socioeconomics or other political factors. It's about insisting on our contractual rights as agreed by the various governmental entities and avoiding further traffic gridlock to our residents. There's nothing more. That's what this is all about. There is a saying that us trial lawyers use. You try the law first. When that's not working for you, you try the facts. When the facts aren't working for you, you try the client, meaning you point the finger at the clients. So when the law and the facts aren't on your side, then that's when you get the other rhetoric that we've been hearing. And that's not okay.
Councilman Rodriguez. Any further discussion? Councilwoman Morano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will try to be brief as I know the clock is running. At no point in time have I asked legal to shift their focus away from facts and agreements and contracts. The comments that I am addressing were comments that were not made about me. If they were made about me, I may have probably let them go. They were made about my residents, and I will always come to the rescue of my residents and speak out on their behalf because they cannot do so for themselves. I'm not the type of person to leave things unanswered. I like to address them. I would like to give this council the opportunity to address this as a council, not just me as Councilwoman Ruano, not just the mayor on TV, but all of us as a council. We are a model town for many, many things. We have on many occasions taken symbolic votes. One of the last ones that we took that I was all in favor for was regarding the government of Venezuela that's a bazillion miles away from us. This lets us be a model town. We are the ones that will dictate what decorum is among elected officials. And if you'll indulge me for 30 seconds, it is our responsibility, not only with the county, not only with the city of Hialeah, but with all other municipalities, to set forth a resolution that shows that we can disagree cordially and that we can speak to one another, not at one another, and definitely not about one another.
Council, any further discussion? Yes, Councilman Quayle.
You know, I'm hearing what Councilwoman Morano is saying, and I don't think that anybody here disagrees with you in the sense that, you know, we take a very similar position in how we feel about this. And when I first made my opening comments was I wanted to make sure that it doesn't detract. So I want everybody, because I'm taking a lot of advice from people who are a little bit more politically savvy than I am. And you said yourself, you know, you've seen this play out, and I want to make sure that you guys are reading the same thing that I read, because this looks pretty innocuous to me, but you believe that this will be an instrument that will dissuade from the issues at hand if we were to pass this today? Either one of you two that I consider
I'll let Councilman
that are non-political
Dieguez.
neophytes.
My whole viewpoint on that is that the genesis of the item, notwithstanding that it has been broadened to include other remarks that are just as offensive that were made by somebody who is supposed to be our state representative, but putting that aside, that it's been broadened and it is pretty innocuous, the reality is that the genesis of the item is already in the public record, which was that it was a direct rebuke to the mayor of Hialeah. He's probably already going to use that anyway against us, you know. And again, what we're talking about is not shifting the legal strategy or anything like that. It's about shifting the PR strategy, the political side of it, right? We have made already a lot of progress in shifting the debate from, you know, Miami Lakes is just being reasonable, open up the bridges, to now even their residents are talking about, you know what, let's talk about ramps to I-75 and all that. We're making progress in the path that we're going on. They, you know, the mayor has his own issues in Hialeah. That's why he's taking this position, right? We don't need to basically start, you know, devoting airtime, as it were, away from this. I'm pretty sure even without the press release, somebody will pick this up, you know, to run with, and I'll just, you know, 15 seconds. You know, I just am deeply concerned from the political perspective that we're just allowing him to basically shore up his own already pretty bad political position with the people west of I-75. They're already yelling at him at the fact, you know, for the reasons that we are, you know, that they didn't build out the infrastructure before they opened up. And so by giving him this win and making this a Hialeah versus Miami Lakes thing, it just politically sets us back, especially for the people that aren't in Hialeah or in Miami Lakes that we also have to convince to vote with us at the county level. You know, the people that don't understand the issues, if they start getting, you know, seeing this as a Miami Lakes versus their other cousin, you know, in Hialeah, then they're going to tune us out, as opposed to if we go in there talking about the issues.
Mr. Mayor, just once, I promise I'll be very brief. I don't want anyone to misinterpret my remarks that I am in any way in favor of or opposed to this resolution. I'm not. Personally, I'm really not. Councilman Ruano couldn't be more supportive of our strategy and of what we're doing and everything else. I'm telling you, she couldn't be any more supportive or encouraging. And she was one of the first ones who was all over me about this, you know, about 154th Street and 170th. So if I said something that makes anyone think that I do not favor this resolution, I apologize. That's not my role, and that's not what I'm trying to do. I was just trying to lay out for us going forward. Once you guys do what you're doing here, these are the talking points, and we have to hammer them. And that's what we have to stick with. So if in any way I somehow said something that was misinterpreted, I do apologize, but I'm telling you, these are our talking points. These are what we have to hammer them with, day in and day out. The dispute resolution process has started. The resolution going forward and everything else has been signed. We're going forward. And if they come up with antics to close 87th Avenue at 138th Street or something like that, we'll address it at the appropriate time. He can't do it by himself. Jurisdiction for closing roads, when I mean him, I mean the City of Hialeah and their council. The jurisdiction for closing roads is clear in their road transfer agreement and in ours. It's the county that has the jurisdiction. That's the one part of the agreement that has always worried me. And they're not going to close 87th Avenue at 138th.
Look, Councilman Collazo, to your point, obviously we're colleagues, so we have to find whichever direction we're going to go. It is what it is. But being the mayor and being especially the one that talks about the town's positions publicly, I don't give our opponents even an inch, right? And I the change that you want to see in the world, right? We're not going to change the mayor of Hialeah, regardless of what we pass. We could pass 1,000 things how we change it is by people seeing us as the examples. But I'll tell you this, when I first did the Univision 23 head-to-head interview, the vast majority of people were like, man, you know what? You guys in the town of Miami Lakes are spot on. You guys got the facts on your side. You guys are above the fray. You guys didn't get, you know what I mean? Didn't fall for it. So that's just it's my perspective. But I think yeah, as colleagues we can address. Here's a question to Councilman Ruano. Councilman Dieguez just made a good point that there's a state, and I'll give 15 seconds if you guys don't mind. There's another state representative that said some stuff about us. Should we also address that?
I believe the resolution before you addresses residents and elected officials,
Got it.
not only the city of Hialeah, not only Miami-Dade County, not only Hialeahans or Miami Lakers. It addresses humans as a whole, and it kind of walks us through the process of how we should be civil with one another.
Got it. So, any further discussion on this? Councilman Dieguez, you want to chime in? Again, you're done?
No, I'm good.
Councilman Rodriguez, any further discussion, council? All those in favor? Yeah, on the resolution, right?
The motion that I have is from Councilwoman Ruano, motion to pass the resolution, but with no press release. And it was seconded by Collazo. That's the motion that I have. Yes, the resolution deploring inflammatory remarks.
All right, so before we vote,
I'm sorry, just for clarification, the resolution will have to be amended to remove the media component.
and we'll talk about the Bridge Park later. Madam Clerk, are we? No. Any further discussion, council? Anyone else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
The motion fails. We're on to the next item. We're on to the next item, which is, well, wait a second. We have Richard Cooper here from the Miami-Dade League of Cities who wanted to come and address our town council. And I apologize, we'll go to the manager's report. I know he was waiting for the budget section, but I know he has to leave and he had asked for a couple minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, Mr. Manager, Mr. Attorney, Madam Clerk. My name is Richard Cooper. I'm the Executive Director of the Miami-Dade County League of Cities, and I'm here this evening because, and I've been listening, and I know you've had a long evening, a long day, so I'm going to be very short. But I want you to know that the town of Miami Lakes is very important to the League of Cities. And the League of Cities is comprised of 34 cities, towns, and villages of Miami-Dade County. We've been around since the 50s, but more importantly, as you all know, year after year, month after month, day after day, they're eroding and they're chipping at our home rule powers every day, whether it's Tallahassee, whether it's other entities. And the idea of the League of Cities is to work together and to work in a united fashion, and that each city has a voice beyond their jurisdictions, beyond their lines. And that's why I'm here today, to let you know that you're important to us. We need you. We need to continue working together in not only in home rule, but in many other things that we have an opportunity to work with on a regular basis. And I know how difficult the budget is. I know how difficult the decision-making process is. And I just ask you to consider continuing your membership with the League of Cities, because we need you, and I hope that you need us also. So at that note, if you have any questions, either this evening or any other time, I'm always available to meet or speak with any of you. And I thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of the Commission, Council.
Thank you, Richard. I know Richard was an integral part in working with us on the whole workforce housing component that the county was working on, and I know you're a big champion for cities, and something that we had worked on back then also. So,
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Have a good evening and good luck, and thank you all.
thank you, Richard. We are on to the next item, Mr. Manager.
Yeah, at the last meeting, we were directed to come back with a plan to initiate the Bridge Park. So what we have before you is a presentation on what would be Phase 1 of the Bridge Park, which is the area outside of the fence line there. So it's all on Town of Miami Lakes property.
Good evening, Mayor, Town Council, and residents watching at home. This is going to be a little awkward as I'm going to be giving my back to you guys, but I believe you guys have a package here in front of you. And before I begin, I think they can see. Can you guys see that? Okay. So before I begin, I just a point of personal privilege. I want to recognize our planner, Susana Alonso, who worked hand in hand with me on this, and Carlos Acosta and his team, as I annoyed them every single minute of the day based on the recommendation that we got from this town council to try to prepare something that hopefully meets your expectations, and if not exceeds your expectation in tonight's presentation. All right, how do I change the slide, Germán? All right, here we go. So before we get into what we are proposing here, I just wanted to take you guys back to 2016 when we sat with the landscape architect consultants who devised the original conceptual design. We envisioned this space that's going to be just at the west end of 154th Street and 89th Ave, where that cul-de-sac is at, as an entry plaza, as a space that we could activate for residents from all levels, young parents with their strollers, bike pedestrians, and even our elder generation who could wait here as our residents take a nice leisurely stroll on this on our proposed Bridge Park. This is a current up-to-date survey of the space. I just wanted to provide this to you just to indicate our property boundaries and what we're dealing with. Essentially, we have a 98 by 63 foot space that's directly abutting FDOT property to the west, residential to the south, and the new Lennar entry feature that they designed on the north end. And this is an aerial shot of what we're proposing. We just wanted to show this to you so you could kind of see perspective of what we're going to be introducing to you in regards to the Bridge Park. So first off, we have our park dimensions and our features. What we're introducing here are 12-foot entry access points on each end, north end, south end. This would essentially create a shared use path for our bikers along with our pedestrians. 2 landscape islands that are contain native trees and plants. A central area with a featured tree that will provide adequate canopy. 4 benches that will be strategically placed within that set circle in the center. 6 decorative lights with installation, and a French drain is also recommended to provide proper draining due to the impervious areas. So this is the front view as you're approaching the Bridge Park off of 154. You see there we have the 12-foot entry features on both the north, south, and even the east end with the proposed landscaping. This is a view from the north. You can see the benches there in the center and some decorative lights on this end. So the two lights will be on the south end, north end, and right in the middle where the benches are proposed to be located. This is the south view. And last but not least, this is the proposed budget that we were working on to the last minute before presenting to you guys. And I'm here to answer any questions for you.
Danny, and council, I'll break the ice with questions. Danny, can we break ground on this immediately?
So what we're proposing with this is actually we're proposing to go out to get a consultant to get construction documents that will certify and seal the proposed plans. We just got that proposal back from the consultant today, and we're estimating anywhere between 3 to 4 months if we want to go that route to get the designs back from the consultant. That would consist of soil boring, things that we would recommend if we're going to do something at this scale and this size.
Council, questions of staff? Council, just jump in. Just go ahead.
Danny, where would we get the funding for this?
So I believe this is going to be coming out of our park and open spaces funding, which we currently have an estimated approximately $1 million.
Danny.
Yes, sir.
And I'm sorry to jump in, but I'll be honest with you, Danny, 3 to 4 months, on my point of view, is unacceptable. I mean, this is time sensitive. I think we have to expedite this. This has to get expedited.
What I would recommend and possibly guide you is probably approve as is. We could go back to the consultant and try to expedite that and see if we could get that window shortened. If not, we could go ahead and propose to do it without that design component to it.
Councilman Alvarez.
Do we have the flexibility to design something on our own? Like without having to go through a consultant and go through permitting and all that stuff? Like, is there an alternate? Because I agree with Mayor Sid. 3 to 4 months is too long. What is a viable option where we can turn this around within the next week, in the next few weeks, the next month, we can break ground?
So we could go ahead and, I'll just use the dog park as an example. That's something that we kind of did in-houses. There are some challenges with the recent site. There are some ponding issues that we're currently encountering. That is a risk that we will take if we go without that design component. But we could get it done if that's the direction that we want to approach. Like I said, I would recommend probably approving the budget as is. That would give us time to reach back to the consultant to see if they could expedite the design, the sign and seal design sooner. If not, we will move forward and design it in-house.
Well, yeah, you guys did a phenomenal job with the dog park. So I'm saying, in the vision, right, Mayor, we said sidewalks, trees, benches. Sidewalks would be for walkways, running, jogging, etc. Can we approve a budget along those lines and then you work backwards? This is your budget. We don't go through a consultant and we design that first phase to expedite the process. Can we set a budget at, let's say, hypothetically, the 126, but not go via the consultant with the direction of including sidewalks, tall trees, and benches for the residents in that phase one?
I just want to break ground next week, man. I'll be honest with you. However we can expedite it, Danny, I think.
Yeah, if that's the direction that we take, then we'll.
Yeah. What's the total number, Danny? I think 191.
We're at $206,974.
Okay, so if the council can pass a motion to adopt this in essentially the conceptual design that you saw here tonight, not exceed 206. We're gonna look and see. We'll work with our engineers and we'll look and see if we can start moving on this right away, and then we'll move forward with this project and see how we can do it without having to go and use an outside consultant.
I'll move it.
I'll
second
This
for
is
discussion.
incredibly essential to our legal strategy. I just want to point that out.
Yep. So he
Yeah,
seconded it?
there's a
Is there
second.
discussion?
Discussion.
All right, so, Danny, is there any way that we can get like a foundation permit? Sometimes when contractors start a project, instead of pulling a complete set of building plans, they'll move into phase one with a foundation permit that'll allow you to start tearing up the land, setting it up. Is that something that's a viable option that maybe we can get done very quickly?
Carlos Acosta, Public Works Director, Mayor, Council. I think when we talk about like excavation permits and things like that, there's usually plans associated with that. It's just a phased approach, right? You're allowing them to do certain activities, but normally they move in with construction plans. I mean, there's other approaches like design build where the design is not complete, but there's certain phases that are approved in that methodology.
Okay.
I mean, we talked about the dog park. I think the dog park was kind of unique in a sense that, you don't have vehicles driving over the concrete. I mean, this is just pedestrian. If we want to make sure that we have a park that eventually we could have vehicles use that pathway to access for maintenance, we don't want to run the chance of, pouring concrete there and then it breaks in 3 or 4 months because it can't handle the weight. So the proposal that we have here includes, having a soil boring, make sure that we prepare the base and it has a good base to lay the concrete. So, I mean, we could go different approaches. It's just we give up on some, some designs criteria.
What we'll do is we'll caucus tomorrow, and we'll also bring the building official, Mr. Palacio, into the discussion. And I could tell you that we're going to do anything and everything possible to break ground as soon as possible. So what I will commit to is that we'll have internal discussions and come up with a subsequent plan to see how quickly we can make this happen. And then I'll email that out to each of you with a timeline. What we don't have here is a timeline. We have estimates, and we'll establish that before the end of this week. We'll establish a timeline on what are the things that we can and cannot do, and we'll try everything possible to get this kick-started as soon as possible.
And I'll work with a consultant. I mean, normally these proposals, I mean, we reached out to them. They got to generate these proposals right pretty quick, so sometimes timelines are a little on the conservative side. But, I mean, I'll work with them tomorrow morning first thing and make sure we could compress that schedule.
Any further discussion, council? There's a motion and a second. Anyone else want to discuss this? Funding source?
It's open parks
and open space.
Yeah.
Okay.
Open space.
Perfect. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Carlos. We're on to town manager reports, 15A2.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring you up to speed. Some of you, well, all of you were notified when we received recently a letter from an entity called Florida Housing. It was in regard to the Lucida apartment project over on 77th Court. The Florida Housing is a financing entity, and they were looking for comments from the town because the developers of the Lucida project had applied for some type of incentive for developers to construct and rehab affordable multi-family housing. I worked with our deputy town attorney, Lorenzo Coviella, and we drafted a letter that went out under my signature advising the Florida Housing the parameters under which that application was approved, including all of the evidence, including the application, testimony, etc. Today, we also collaborated and drafted a letter that should have gone out today. If it hasn't gone out in the mail, it's already sitting there to go out tomorrow morning to the property owners, also putting them on notice that any changes that deviate from their application, they need to come back to the town for further review. So just wanted to bring you up to speed on that and let you know what are those two measures that we took.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Any questions of the manager on this issue? Seeing Councilman Collazo.
Just to be clear, Mr. Manager, because I know that was one of the issues that had been raised before, and there had been concerns, and I know the mayor has been very concerned, and several people here concerned on what the intention has been. So we have established very clearly from the record what the conditions were, and you said that they were included in that rebuttal to the Florida Housing Corporation, correct?
Yes, if you like, I can read it. It isn't that long. I could read it out into the record if you prefer. But it does make it clear that the testimony and the evidence provided during the hearing indicated that it would be market rate housing, and anything that deviates from that, our expectation is that it would come back to the council for subsequent review.
And my concern is just if someone who comes before us and makes certain commitments and then changes what they said before, does that give us the opportunity to revisit that item?
I think that's more of a attorney question.
We don't have anything currently in our code that's like that, kind of a fraud type provision or a misstatement, that if somebody makes a misstatement in their applications that we have the right to revisit it. That's something that I've discussed with the manager as something that we may want to look at. This past week I had the opportunity to attend the land use conference up in Tampa, and the city of Tampa does have a provision in their land development code that does permit that, but ours does not.
But I just want to be clear. Subsequent to this whole application process, there was an MOU that was agreed to between the town and the developers of the Lucida project that had certain parameters. And those parameters, it's an agreement, it's a contract for all intents and purposes between the developers and the town. And if the parameters of that contract are not being abided by the developers, then that's an action that maybe we can consider enforcing.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Any other questions in this regard? Seeing none, we're moving on to the attorney's report and update on litigation.
I would wait a few minutes for Mr. Gastesi to enter, but I believe that Mr. Gastesi covered, the town manager covered the issues on 154th, on 170th. Letters have gone out on 154th. We've asked for a meeting of the bodies. We're going to be sending a second letter. Again, we haven't heard anything back from the county since we sent the letter requesting a meeting of the bodies. City of Hialeah was placed on notice that they are party to the action, and we've moved forward also with public with different things on with regards to this. And that's, I think, all we have to report at this time, Mr. Manager. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. If there's no other discussion, we're going to move on to the budget workshop.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, I did have one question.
Yes.
With respect to 154th and the ongoing dispute resolution there, where are we? I might have missed it. Where are we with respect to the meeting of the two bodies?
With respect to the meeting of the two bodies, we sent the letter requesting it as per the statute. For us to be able to meet with Miami-Dade County, and obviously FDOT and the City of Hialeah have been a participant all this time. The one thing that did change is that we did formally add the City of Hialeah as a party. We have not heard back from them. We've prepared a letter. It's going to be sent out tomorrow, a second letter, and I'll be making some telephone calls to the Miami-Dade County to get dates for the meeting of the two bodies. And we're going to include also the City of Hialeah to the extent possible to be a participant in that now that they are a formal body, a formal party to the action.
And does the statute prescribe a certain amount of time in which they must respond? You know, much like with the 558 letter, for example, that you have a certain amount of time that you either respond or the other side has the right to proceed with the lawsuit.
I'd have to go back to take a look at the statute if there's a reasonableness as far as the time is concerned. There is a time between the first meeting and the meeting of the two bodies, which is about 50 days. What occurred is that we had several meetings, as you know, and the last meeting was that we were going to abate all actions for a certain period of time on both, and that didn't occur, and so that's why we've called for a meeting of the bodies. I can look into that and respond to you, Councilman.
Perfect.
Afterwards.
Yeah, and just, as the sooner we can get this moving, the better.
We are moving it.
Perfect.
Full speed ahead.
Mr. Attorney, if the county commissioner puts 154 on the agenda for September, are we filing an immediate injunction or what? If they don't respond for the meeting of both bodies? I mean, that's where they're like, well, we don't have to, we're moving forward.
At this time, what the council, you have advised us is that all, cards are on the table as far as different actions that we can take. At this point, because we're not in open litigation, I can't have executive session with you as a body, but should that be brought on the table, we would be meeting with you individually to discuss what options we may have and what strategy we could have going forward.
All right, thank you. No other discussions or questions of the attorney? This meeting is adjourned. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Mayor, can we take a 5-minute recess just so we can set up the presentation for the budget workshop?
Got it.
And just as a caveat, obviously, due to the vote on the FPL franchise fee, the numbers are going to be skewed, but I'll point those out wherever they differ in the presentation.
5-minute recess.
Raul left at the most opportune time possible. All right. Raul se fue en el momento más oportuno.
Oye, yo le mandé para ayudarte y yo fui, come back, you're right, me he ignorado.